Hokage, Chronicle of the True Farewell. Hey! Look who's back for more adventures. We love having you here to continue this story that keeps us all awake. Important note, all of this is pure fiction, so don't try any techniques you hear here in real life. Your neighbor might call the cops. This amazing novel and all its rights belong to the original author. We're just the ones giving it voice and drama. Are you enjoying the show? Prove it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and leaving that like that motivates us so much. And if you want VIP access to exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting with things you won't find anywhere else. Chapter 326. There's something wrong with this kid's style. The ice ball continued to sink into the ocean. As time passed, it plummeted to 200 meters, 300 meters, 500 meters, 1,000 meters. Deeper than the surface, it could only see a barely perceptible glimmer of light when it looked up. The surroundings gradually sank into a cold, silent darkness. Even with its density altered by the ninjutsu, the ice ball continued to sink deeper and deeper into the ocean floor. Strange, Hashigaki Kisame stared at Uchiha Chi in surprise, frowning deeply. He could sense that the remaining chakra in Uchiha Chi's body was being drawn to the surrounding waters, dispersing into the water and gathering towards him. However, the amount of chakra was truly meager. Kisame roughly estimated that this amount of chakra wouldn't even be enough for him to unleash a blast wave. Why does someone so renowned, capable of defeating so many powerful beings, only possess this level of chakra? And Kisame's gaze fell on the 1,000 or so sharks circling Uchiha Chi, hesitant to approach. A pair of pea-sized sharks' eyes shone with confusion. Why weren't the 1,000 sharks he summoned from the deep sea even trying to bite Uchiha Chi? It was as if the sharks he summoned were subconsciously afraid of this little brat, as if he outshone them by 1,000 times, so much so that they wouldn't even dare approach. And we've already dived over 1,000 meters. Why is this kid acting like nothing's happened? Looking at Uchiha Chi, who was blowing bubbles from his mouth, swallowing a mouthful of seawater and nearly choking, and now pounding his chest and coughing, looking like he was on an underwater vacation, Kisame couldn't accept it. Why does this guy's style seem so off the mark? The pressure at 1,000 meters underwater is equivalent to a force of 10 million newtons per square meter, equivalent to 1 million kilograms, 1,000 tons, of pressure. This pressure is already unbearable for Hashigaki Kisame. Even with his Samehada fusion mode and his unique bloodline, which have adapted him to the deep sea, it feels like he's being weighed down by dozens of elephants, making every move extremely difficult. I can't wait any longer. If I continue diving, even I won't be able to hold on. With this thought, a hint of murderous intent flashed in Hashigaki Kisame's eyes. Then, let's do it now. However, just as Hashigaki Kisame finished muttering to himself, he suddenly felt something tap on his shoulder. Just as he frowned, thinking that some blind shark had touched him, a curious question came to his ear. Then what are you going to do? Hashigaki Kisame was suddenly stunned, and then turned his head stiffly. Then, he saw Uchiha Chi, who had been so helpless in the water prison just now that he could only blow bubbles, now inexplicably appeared behind him. Seeing this face, Kisame was instantly enveloped and oppressed by a heavy, indelible horror and fear, unable to extricate himself. Unlike before, at this moment, the light at the location of Uchiha Chi's heart grew brighter and brighter, until a hand grasped the fin atop his head, and the irresistible force forcibly twisted his head up, forcing him to helplessly stare into a pair of scarlet Sharingans. Uchiha Chi stared at Hashigaki Kisame, who looked as aggrieved as a 200-pound child, with a ferocious smile. Do you like diving so much, you small fry? The three pitch-black magadama in his eyes spun slightly, and a piercing, intense light instantly engulfed Hashigaki Kisame's entire field of vision. A flash of near madness flashed in Uchiha Chi's eyes. The horizontal stripe in his pupil, which should have been composed of blood dragon eye components, was forcibly swallowed into the vertical pupil by the extremely outrageous and terrifying natural energy. Only the sharp vertical pupil like a dragon's eye and the three pitch-black magadama rotating around it remained in the scarlet eye. Then I'll let you dive enough. As soon as the words fell, Uchiha Chi grabbed Hashigaki Kisame's head with one palm. His 5 fingers were like iron clamps, squeezing Hashigaki Kisame so hard that he felt his brain was about to explode. Wait! He raised his head in horror and glanced at Uchiha Chi, his 2 round shark eyes wide open. The hairs on his body stood up, and dense beads of sweat instantly soaked his forehead. Even his heart was pounding in fear at Uchiha Chi's weird tone. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Stop! No, Don't pinch me anymore. Hoo-ho-hissa, I said it. Uchiha laughed violently. Trash, I'll let you dive enough. The moment the words fell, Uchiha suddenly sank his waist, bowed his legs, and his steps instantly stomped on the helpless seawater under his feet with a muffled bang, pulling out a nearly 8-meter-long empty bubble. Using this force, he grasped Hoshigaki's head and swung it backwards, as if it were a football. Boom, the force from just that one backward pull nearly broke Hoshigaki's neck, causing him to let out a shrill howl. His shark eyes instantly filled with bloodshot and terror. Stop. Stop now, what are you doing? No, don't continue. However, Uchiha ignored them. Then, he suddenly flipped upside down, twisted Hoshigaki's head, and aimed it towards the seabed. He launched it straight at the bottom with a powerful slingshot. Squeak, squeak, squeak. The instantaneous force brought the surrounding seawater to boiling point, emitting a sharp and fierce roar. Dense bubbles burst out from the seabed. As for Hoshigaki Kisame, the projectile, it was as if a rocket launcher had been attached to his feet. Like an arrow, he was instantly thrust from the murky depths of the sea, pierced by Uchiha's palm 4,000 meters below. Bang! A tremendous roar echoed from the seabed, like a small nuclear bomb exploding in the riverbed. The sea surged back. It stretched straight into the lightless darkness of the seabed. A white line of emptiness was drawn. Blood splattered, and red and white smeared the sea. 4,000 meters below the seabed, a scientist once joked that the pressure was equivalent to nearly 1,000 African elephants stepping on a person's back at the same time. Even if Hoshigaki Kisame didn't die soon, he would have died. As for why Uchiha was so sure that the birdman was indeed dead, it was because I didn't control the strength well. It seemed like half of it was not thrown out. Uchiha frowned and glanced at the head that was clasped in his hand and squeezed into pieces. He was a little troubled, but there is an extra gain. Shaking off a lump of rotten meat mixed with broken bones in his hand, Uchiha pulled out a trembling big knife from a pile of bloody things, trying to disguise it as a weapon to pretend to be dead, and glanced at it with a little surprise. The big sword Samethoda, the quality is pretty good, it's mine, at this time. Above the sea, why is Kisame so slow? Bylan stomped his feet nervously, frowning hard as he stepped on the sea surface. The huge pressure of 1,000 meters deep sea, the coldness of ice escape freezing the blood, the suffocating underwater environment, and the desperate situation of chakra being extracted, with so many means. Haven't we gotten rid of that kid? Damn it, damn it, damn it, really troublesome. Why am I so unlucky? Why did I meet him here? Why? If I delay Uchiha Madara, he will kill me. Bylan gritted his teeth, and cursed irrationally as if he had thrown away a broken jar, his face full of indignation and irritability. At this moment, a white, swirling head poked out from his shoulder. Third Hokage, are you talking about that brat named Uchiha? He won't die that easily. You'll need my help eventually, so why not tell me what it feels like to poop? Impossible. Bylan turned his head fiercely, a flash of fury in his eyes, and glared at Afe. Absolutely impossible. No one can survive such an extreme environment, even Uchiha Madara. However, the moment these words fell, a series of bubbles suddenly surged upward from the seabed, stirring the sea surface and exploding with sounds like artillery bombardments. Bylan's expression changed instantly, and he subconsciously looked towards the seabed. He saw, in the deep, seemingly endless depths of the sea. Suddenly, a sun flashed and lit up. Chapter 327 Undersea Nuclear Explosion. 6 Escape Wooden Figures. What's that? Bylan paused, his gaze shifting in a wave of uncertainty as he gazed at the increasingly bright seabed. It was as if the ocean beneath his feet was the sun's abyss, and this very moment was the dawn of the eastern sun. At this moment, the sun beneath the sea and the moon above were clearly separated by the ocean surface. And then, as the seagulls flapped their wings restlessly, their cries shimmering, and the air suddenly grew thick and heavy, Bylan suddenly felt the sea beneath his feet rise. In an incredibly short time, less than 2 seconds, he was lifted nearly 200 meters into the air. The entire surface of the ocean seemed to rise like a massive white mountain. Under the bright moonlight, Gudong, Bylan swallowed hard, quickly turning his head and shouting at Baiju on his shoulder, "Something's coming out, hurry, attach yourself to my body. Get out of here." He could only feel the sea beneath his feet trembling wildly, trembling violently, before he was lifted high. The turbulent current made it almost impossible for him to tread steadily. His toes tapped the white waves as he leaped back at high speed. Seeing Afe on his shoulder still motionless, Bailan couldn't help but glare at him again. How magnificent! Afe stared at the white hill formed purely of water, momentarily entranced. What are you staring at? Bailan shouted, angrily. Oh, yes, Afe regained consciousness, taking one last glance at the scene before him. His body instantly transformed into branches, entwining around Bailan's form to form a pale armor. A colossal amount of chakra poured into his body, imbuing the third Mizukage's movements with the agility and swiftness of his youth. Bailan couldn't help but let out a long, drawn-out sigh. However, before he could fully absorb this surge of power, his expression returned to a state of solemnity as he leaped from the sea and retreated rapidly. At that moment, the white mountain rising high before him, after a brief pause, transformed into a giant white broccoli, expanding wildly in an instant and exploding in all directions. From the center of the mountain, it suddenly exploded. Then, beneath the sea, something seemed to explode. A violent shockwave sent nearly 1,000,000 tons of seawater hurtling into the air, the blast reaching a height of 1,000 meters. Boom, amidst the deafening roar, a nimble figure suddenly leaped out, harnessing the force of the explosion to leap nearly 800 meters above the surface. Like a seabird, it glided through the sky, pursuing Bailan. It was none other than Uchiha Chi. His nascent, sage's heart couldn't contain all the natural energy within a 10,000-meter radius. After reaching its limit, he channeled the excess natural energy through a regenerative barrier, detonating at 100 meters underwater. Using this momentum, he pursued the third Mizukage above the surface. At this moment, the distance between the two was rapidly closing. Damn it! How the hell did that kid do that? Bailan felt his scalp tingle as he glanced sideways at the terrifying scene behind him. Forget about creating such a commotion. Even if he did, there was no way he could survive such an outrageous explosion, let alone use it to accelerate and perform aerial stunts. Seeing no escape, Bailan immediately stood up, slamming his heels into the turbulent sea to stop his momentum. Then, gritting his teeth, he turned around and clasped his hands together. Since you're so eager to die, then I'll show you something beyond ordinary Uchiha like you, something that belongs only to that man. Bailan's face darkened, a cold glint in his eyes. The forbidden power of the world, with a Fae providing a massive amount of chakra, Bailan's own Kekaic escape, combined with the Phase 5 elemental escape techniques and forbidden techniques, would release, wooden man technique. Bailan clasped his hands together, his gaze fierce, and slammed his pale palm, wrapped around a Fae, down onto the sea. Instantly, countless thick branches and vines appeared from thin air, surging, tangling, and converging from the surface. A massive wooden man, over 40 meters tall, sat upright on the surface of the sea, rising from the ground, facing the oncoming tsunami, huge waves, and the soaring Uchiha Chi. The 6 heads growing from the Buddhist ford opened their maws and spewed out 6 ice dragons. 6 releases, ice dragon bite. 6 massive ice dragons opened their maws once again, emitting powerful release techniques representing fire, water, earth, wind, and thunder, as they charged towards Uchiha Chi. Unlike the small wooden figures with hundreds of hands that Afe had formed when he enveloped Yamato, the wooden figures summoned by Bailan now lacked a dense network of wooden hands, relying solely on a single, boater-like halo. Sitting cross-legged on the sea, they lacked the ability to move quickly, and even at close range, their attacks were limited to the reach of their 2 wooden figures' palms. However, even with only the 5 release techniques of this castrated version of the wooden figure technique, acquired by Bing Zixi, Bailan was confident that Uchiha Chi would be no match for this long-lost power, belonging only to the legendary ninja god. At this moment, Uchiha Chi, who was rapidly approaching, was suddenly startled. He stared at the massive wooden figure before him, the 6 ice dragons holding the 5 releases in their mouths, and Bailan, standing atop the wooden figure, his hands forming hand seals, his clothes shredded, and his body enveloped in a pale mass. His pupils suddenly constricted. Although he had anticipated the water country being under Uchiha Madara's control, and the possibility that the third Mizukage had an inexplicable connection to the true Shura of the ninja realm, at this moment, seeing the wooden figure, seeing the object known as Uzumaki White Zetsu on Bailan's body, unbelievably the White Zetsu form that would lean over Uchiha Obito in the future and cause tragedy. Uchiha Chi's heart sank, his expression instantly grim. This meant, Uchiha Madara had truly noticed him. The encounter with the Kurigakure was no accident. Moreover, his actions might have impacted their Munai plan. so much so that Uchiha Madara might even attempt to kill him. Time, then, was running out for Uchiha Chi. He must kill Uchiha Madara before he takes him seriously enough to retrieve his Rinnegan and take action himself. At this thought, Uchiha Chi's eyes flashed with an intense urgency. Uchiha Madara's power was self-evident. Even in his old age, if he could retrieve a Rinnegan from Nagato and perform the jutsu known as the Rinnegan prison, no one in the current ninja world would be a match for him. This was the boundary between the six paths. However, since the Rinnegan was still in Nagato's possession, there was still room for maneuver. While Madara was still formidable in his old age without the Rinnegan, he was not invincible. With this thought, Uchiha Chi gathered his scattered thoughts, fixed his gaze on the third Mizukage, Bailan, not far away, and narrowed his eyes slightly. Chapter 328, Susanoo passes cigarettes, his magic power is boundless. At this moment, above the sea, 6 ice dragons, each over 10 meters long, roared and raised their heads, colliding head-on with the figure hurtling towards them like a cannonball. Fire, lightning, water, wind, and rock crushed. In mid-air, 5 ice dragons shed their crystalline shells, revealing their true forms in their own colors. Together with a 6th dragon, its body as translucent as ice, they charged forward. The ripples of wind shook hearts, sending waves surging high. Facing these 6 behemoths before them, these powerful attacks, deriving from the power of the Outer Path Demon Statue and Hashirama's cells, were so powerful that even Sarutobi Hiruzen and the Raikage, known as the strongest Hokage, were helpless during the 4th Shinobi World War. However, for Uchiha Chi, this was the perfect moment to test his own combat prowess. At this moment, Uchiha Chi took a deep breath, and while soaring at breakneck speed, he suddenly raised his left hand. His fingers spread out, and a white crescent-shaped mark appeared on his palm. Infused with excessive natural energy, this naturally endowed physique, surpassing Jugo's side-effect-free, Sage Transformation, could be further developed. For example, Sage Transformation, Curse Seal II. In his normal state, Uchiha Chi possessed nearly the full power of Jugo's Curse Seal II. Now, with this natural energy overflowing, he pushed his Sage Transformation abilities to their limit, reaching Curse Seal II. The white crescent-shaped mark on his palm rapidly expanded, transforming into white lines that instantly spread across his body. At this moment, this power, generated by recellular attraction, became heavenly initiation. It instantly infused his body with a flood of natural energy, granting him healing powers far exceeding Jugo's, empowering his body to achieve the ultimate power of evolution. Guided by this power, Uchiha Chi experienced a brief period of growth, growing from a mere 1.6 meters tall to 1.69 meters. Well, it looked like he'd grown a year older, finally becoming a rebellious teenager of 13 or 14. At the same time, the body cells, weakened by the Sage Form explosion, were being revitalized, Sage Form side effects temporarily removed. You can enter Sage Form again, estimated duration of Sage Form. Ignoring the subtitles that suddenly popped up before his eyes, Uchiha Chi suddenly opened his eyes. The crimson in his eyes faded, instantly transforming into a pair of radiant golden dragon pupils. Endless power flowed through his body, a crackling sound emanating from the base of his spine. Then, he suddenly raised his head, extended his right hand, and unsheathed the great sword Samehuda from his back, bringing it to his shoulder. At this moment, Uchiha Chi held the sword at his shoulder with one hand extended, fingers spread. The thrust imparted by the natural energy explosion sent his body lurching forward, propelling him forward like a cannonball, poised to collide with the 6 terrifying, mighty dragons. In an instant, the 2 poles collided. Watching from afar, Bailan's eyes flashed with murderous intent. Standing atop the wooden figure's shoulder, his lips curled into a cruel smile. The battle is over. This move was even more powerful than the one Fa used during the 4th Shinobi World War. Using ice release to give form to the 5 releases, transforming them, interconnecting them to amplify their power, and finishing with a pure ice release. Even the Raikage, with his mightiest shield, couldn't ignore such damage. However, the next moment, Bailan's smile froze. Uchiha Chi, without even a dodge, caught the massive ice dragon's head first, attempting to stop the dragon chariot with his bare hands. Veins bulged on his forehead, and the muscles in his left arm swelled to the point of bursting his sleeve. Huh? After absorbing the chakra, Uchiha Chi glanced at the Samehuda in his hand, then shook his head. With a look of disdain, he tossed it into the sea, sighing with regret. It's too short, too weak, it's not satisfying at all, I still have to use this. As soon as he finished speaking, Uchiha's eyes were once again stained with scarlet. The skeleton of his companion instantly appeared behind him, 26 bones ranging from bright yellow to crimson rising from the ground behind Uchiha. A half-skeletal Susanoo quickly took shape in the flames, and a giant skeletal hand instantly condensed at the shoulder joint. Is that Susanoo? Damn it, Kisame, that loser. How did Samehada fall into his hands? Bailan, standing above the wooden figure, shuddered at the sight, his eyes widening as if he had seen a ghost. Having been nearly crushed to death by Uchiha Madara's Susanoo, Bailan was naturally well aware of its power. Seeing this, he immediately concluded that Uchiha was relying on Susanoo to resist his technique. He quickly formed a way seal with both hands, attempting to control the giant water dragon to lift Uchiha from the sea. A half-toned Susanoo couldn't defend against an attack from below. Having fought Uchiha Madara, he knew this, at least from his experience. However, what followed shocked Bailan so much that he almost questioned his own life. At that moment, after summoning Susanoo, Uchiha didn't immediately attack the remaining 5 dragons as he had expected. Instead, he calmly extended his hand, and at that moment, the flaming Susanoo behind him unsheathed from between 2 massive bony palms, an 18-meter-long thunderbolt sword. Immediately afterwards, the summoned Susanoo respectfully handed the 18-meter-long thunderbolt sword to its master. Uchiha enthusiastically accepted the sword and leaped directly out of Susanoo's protective range, swinging the 18-meter-long thunderbolt sword excitedly at the 5 dragons before him. Just then, Bailan, anticipating Uchiha's movements, manipulated the 5 dragons to turn. For a moment, it looked as if Uchiha, carrying the Butsumayoujin, had leaped out of Susanoo and was chasing after Bailan's 5 dragons. The vast size difference between the two made the scene seem incredibly eerie. Chapter 329 How can immortal arts be so inconvenient? What kind of fighting style is this? Completely abandoning Susanoo's defense, how will he withstand the next attack? The absurd scene before Bailan made his scalp tingle. However, Uchiha quickly gave him the answer. At this moment, holding a giant thunder sword as tall as a building in both hands, Uchiha leaped from mid-air and landed heavily on the water, sending up a wave over 3 meters high. Then, he raised his head, his eyes shining, and locked his gaze on the 3rd Mizukage above the wooden figure. Then, he took a step forward, 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, until he was running wildly. With an exaggerated stance, reminiscent of a cheetah, yet also a butterfly, his muscles strained to the limit, each step unleashing a blast of air cannons, each leap capable of leaping over 10 meters above the surface of the sea. In a gesture that completely surpassed human limits, Uchiha swung the 18-meter-long thunderbolt sword in his hand, leaving after images, twirling madly as his body pitched and tilted. With a single blow, he could detonate a giant dragon in its ninjutsu form. His footsteps grazed the water, their shape completely obscured. Completely defying the laws of physics, his speed had already surpassed Mach 8.8, entering the hypersonic realm. Boom, 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 boom. In the blink of an eye, Uchiha surged past like a bulldozer, exploding 5 giant dragons before landing on the surface with a mighty leap. So fast, Bailan's face changed drastically. With a speed surpassing ninjutsu, his escape technique couldn't even reach Uchiha's reach. Yet, in a split second, the opponent was in front of him, swinging his terrifying-looking thunderstick. At such close range, he was completely unable to resist such violence. I can't let him get any closer. With this thought, Bailan's face turned slightly panicked, sweat dripping from his forehead. He immediately formed hand seals, one hand pressing down on the wooden figure's head. Compound ninjutsu, Sea of Trees and Ice Field, Ice Release, 10,000 miles Extreme Ice Shield. The 2 ninjutsu were unleashed in quick succession. In an instant, the seawater beneath the massive, 40-meter-tall wooden figure sitting cross-legged on the sea surface froze into ice, spreading at an incredible speed to nearly 1,000 meters, forming a crystal-clear ice field. Then, the surface of the ice field suddenly cracked, and a forest erupted from it, instantly growing to over 5 meters tall, forming a complex barrier line in front of Uchiha. Stomping heavily on the ice, Uchiha couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. This area of effect, combined ninjutsu of ice release and wood release combined, possessed both the deceleration effect of ice release and the chakra absorption effect of wood release. and, boom, from the place where Uchiha stepped, seemingly fragile ice walls suddenly rose up around him, capable of absorbing Senjutsu. Clearly, the former was intended to create favorable terrain to slow him, while the latter was to prevent his Darn self-relay cannon from piercing the ice and would release another Senjutsu-absorbing ice release. Uchiha opened his Sharingan and stared. This kind of Senjutsu-absorbing ice release was unheard of, not even in the original novels. So how could the third Mizukage, a relatively unknown figure, be able to do this? Thinking of this, Uchiha immediately raised his right hand and unleashed a Curse Seal II-style Dolian self-raising cannon, which instantly expanded to over 2 meters wide. Bang! The bright yellow pellet instantly shot out, blasting into the ice wall, leaving a deep crater, but never breaking through. However, as he observed the scene with his Sharingan, Uchiha chuckled. So that's it, is this the so-called Absolute Zero Ice? Uchiha let out a sneer. As expected, it's this kind of cheap trick. As the light cannon exploded and was instantly absorbed, the Sharingan observed that within the shattered ice wall, a white substance at its core quickly petrified and shattered. This white substance was the true jutsu against Senjutsu. It was the Uzumaki white Zetsu Afehi possessed, the Spore Jutsu. This jutsu not only absorbed chakra, but also Senjutsu chakra. Uzumaki white Zetsu Afehi was originally cultivated by Uchiha Madara using Hashirama cells using an outer path demon statue. He possessed a capacity for Senjutsu chakra. During the Fourth Shinobi World War, Orochimaru, with the cooperation of Team Hawk, struck him with a curse seal in an attempt to break through Afei's defenses. However, after being struck by the curse seal, Afei was restrained for less than 10 seconds before immediately recovering and continuing the fight as if nothing had happened. This jutsu, when subjected to attack, absorbs chakra and even Senjutsu chakra through the Spore Jutsu, causing the ninjutsu's attack to inflict only the initial damage of the ice release upon impact. This creates the illusion that the jutsu can truly freeze kinetic energy at the molecular level, leaving only potential energy. This absolute zero is completely false. Rather than the third Mizukage defending against Uchiha's Senjutsu attack, it was Uzumaki white Zetsu Afehi who defended against his attack. It was Uchiha Madara who defended against his attack. At this moment, above the wooden man's head, Bailan showed a surprised smile as he saw that the combination of ninjutsu he had performed had perfectly achieved the desired effect and trapped Uchiha on the ice field. As long as Uchiha could not get close to him, his ninjutsu could hit Uchiha. With a wood release, piercing technique he got from Afei, he would definitely kill this ignorant and arrogant kid. Ha 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 ha, kid, in the face of this old man's absolute zero, this is all the strength you can rely on. His eyes suddenly turned cold, and he pulled a branch from his pale palm. He shouted sternly, then, this is your death. However, Uchiha didn't bother to waste time arguing with this outwardly strong but inwardly weak piece of trash. Instead, he responded with, shut up, Uchiha roared, wrapping his arm around the greatsword. He raised his right hand and stared unwillingly at the black sun mark on his palm. Without immortal arts, can't I kill people? Is immortal art so inconvenient? After asking himself this question, Uchiha stared at his right hand, as if realizing something, and then, his eyes darkened, he resolutely closed them, and grasped the black sun mark, clenching it into a fist. Instead of unleashing the Duolian uncontrolled cannon, he aimed it at himself, at his body. Boom, blood spurted out of his palm. The white immortal lines all over his body seemed to connect at that moment, spreading to his palms, absorbing the kinetic energy of the immortal artillery and transforming it into a nearly violent force that flowed through his body. Endless gusts of wind surrounded his right arm, and the natural energy within a radius of 10,000 meters spontaneously danced around the swing of his right fist. Chapter 330, Narrow Space, Dense Clouds. The third Mizukage, Hakuren, was surprised to see Uchiha, seemingly trapped, suddenly react like this. The distance between him and me was a full 300 meters, and a human fist is only 10 centimeters, and with the arm only 70 centimeters. Swinging his fist forward would barely create a breeze. Even if his physical skills were powerful enough to fight a tailed beast at close range, but how could such a weak fist possibly hit me at such a distance? At this thought, Hakuren's lip curled in a sneer. With Iwagakure, Tsunagakure, and Kumagakure diligently spreading the news about Uchiha's latest display of tailed beast-level physical combat abilities, he had naturally received information. A crucial point was this: During his battles with the Four Tails and Eight Tails Jinchuriki, Uchiha Chi, who had used his ultimate trump card, had launched every attack at close range. Therefore, in this state, Uchiha Chi had a significant flaw. That is, his arms weren't long enough. However, the next moment, Bailan's expression froze. Wait, what is that? Uchiha Chi fiercely flexed his hips, stomped his foot heavily onto the ground, and delivered a powerful punch. A sonic boom suddenly rose before him, rippling the air. Then, a flash of light suddenly shone from in front of him. In a blinding gap, it surged across the vast ice sheet, spanning 300 meters, illuminating directly in front of the 40-meter-tall wooden figure. Then, boom, a fistful of wind exploded from the light cannon. Like the petals of a mandala, it danced around the exploding light cannon. The sea, lifted by the gust of wind, formed a swirling, tornado-like water blade. The night was illuminated by the aurora, and everything was shrouded in a pale white. The ice before Uchiha Chi's body instantly collapsed. Under this pure, ultimate physical attack, comparable to daytime tigers, the sea evaporated instantly, the vast ice sheet split in two, nearly 100 ice walls infused with this sport technique shattered, and the forest growing on the ice sheet was crushed inch by inch. Elsewhere, a powerful fist wind surged across 300 meters, instantly lifting Bailan's head off, blowing his mouth open, exposing his teeth, and pulling his skin back. Hiss, 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 the wooden figure beneath him let out an unbearable, shrill, crunching cry. Bailan narrowly avoided being thrown back and pulverized by the wooden figure's Buddha statue backlight, but the 300-meter distance was already the limit of this fist technique, saving him from being instantly thrown and smashed into pulp. However, he barely managed to hold on until the fist wind died away. Suddenly, a violent flash of lightning suddenly blazed in the darkness. A sturdy figure swung an 18-meter-long thunderbolt sword fiercely, blasting the giant wooden figure's head with a single blow and shattering the Buddha statue's backlight into smithereens. Unaware of what had happened in that brief moment, Bailan instinctively reached for something, the sudden sense of loss making him reach for something. The next moment, he grabbed a strong arm gripping his neck. Bewildered, he looked up and saw a pair of majestic, vertically rotating crimson eyes surrounded by three black Magatama. Jinjutsu, Sharingan. Instinctively, Bailan clenched the spores on his palm, his heart pounding. White Zetsu, trapped in the Sharingan's eye technique. Only aid from others could release it. However, Uchiha Chi, already aware of the other man's cloak of a Fey, wouldn't give him that opportunity. Just as a white branch emerged from the third Mizukage's shoulder, Uchiha Chi suddenly grasped it with his right hand, entwined with white celestial patterns, and yanked it back with a powerful force. The irresistible force nearly ripped the third Mizukage's body in two. A white creature with a swirling face was ripped from his body. How is this possible? Even before a Fei's shrill scream had died down, Uchiha Chi stared directly at the swirling black hole in his opponent's face, where it looked like an eye, and his Sharingan shone once again. Bloodshot eyes suddenly gathered, covering the whites of his eyes. Senjutsu Sharingan, white eyes, floating on a piece of ice above the sea. Uchiha Chi looked at the two figures he had knocked unconscious on the ground, frowning slightly. One was the third Mizukage, with long, dry white hair and a beaded ornament on his head. The other was a pale creature with a swirling face. The third Mizukage and a Fei. Moments ago, after knocking them to the ground, unable to rise, Uchiha Chi had forcibly read their memories with his Sharingan. Ah-Fei's memories were chaotic and disorganized, and he couldn't read anything of value. Uchiha Chi had to use Jinjutsu to erase the fragment at the end of his memory. However, from the third Mizukage's mind, he unearthed some information that surprised even Uchiha Chi. First, his encounter with the Kurigakure fleet was truly a sudden event. Second, the third Mizukage was, as Uchiha Chi had suspected, a puppet figure promoted by Uchiha Madara to secretly control the power of the water country. His purpose was to feed the Three Tails Jinchuriki to the Outer Path demon statue to prolong Uchiha Madara's life. He had encountered him along the way and was forced to engage in combat to prevent any information leaks. Finally, he unearthed an unusual piece of information from his mind. A month and a half prior, Uchiha Madara had intended to kill Shirinu, but after a trip, he suddenly abandoned the idea. This information made Uchiha Chi take a deep breath. A month and a half ago, he was ambushed by Killer B, the Eight Tails Jinchuriki. This meant that at that time, or even earlier, Uchiha Madara had already set his sights on him. The existence of the third Mizukage, Hakuren, was also quite puzzling. According to Uchiha Chi's deduction of the original history, the third Mizukage should have been dead by this point. He likely died before or at the beginning of the Third Shinobi World War, during the Battle of Midori Reef between Iwagakure and Kurigakure, killed or seriously injured amidst the turmoil and external ambush of the ninja villages. This was followed by a period of rule by the Kurigakure Elder Master, until 3 years after the Battle of Kanobi Bridge, when Kurudaji Yagura became the Three-Tails Jinchuriki and ascended to the throne of the fourth Mizukage. Now that the Battle of Midorima Reef between Iwagakure and Kurigakure has concluded, a man who should have died has survived unharmed. The fundamental reason for this is the shift in the Kurigakure situation, triggered by Uchiha Chi's influence. Iwagakure's surprise attack failed, prolonging the war into a stalemate. However, within Kurigakure, thanks to intelligence provided by Aburame Ryoma, Kurigakure had time to react, and under the external threat, the three factions, which should have been in internal turmoil, briefly united to face the enemy. The civil unrest that was supposed to erupt within Kurigakure never did, and Meijetsu Kazuki, Yagura Karadachi, and Pufferfish Kazuna didn't launch a coup, allowing the third Mizukage to survive. This battle also made the third Mizukage realize the potential for unity within Kurigakure. A united Kurigakure clearly didn't meet Uchiha Madara's expectations. So, a month and a half ago, shortly after the Battle of Midorima Reef, Madara had decided to kill the third Mizukage, who had been harboring ulterior motives. However, thanks to Uchiha Chi, he was spared another blow. Thinking of this, Uchiha Chi couldn't help but gasp, and quickly deduced a very outrageous conclusion: the reason why Uchiha Madara spared the life of the third Mizukage, and the reason why the third Mizukage escaped the killing for the third time, was actually because of himself. Madara wanted him, Uchiha Chi, to become the executor of the Eye of the Moon plan. Uchiha Madara has noticed me a long time ago. Thinking of this, Uchiha Chi's face suddenly became extremely ugly. Moreover, he wanted to arrange a tragedy for me, just like he arranged for Uchiha Ebido to witness the tragedy of Kakashi stabbing Nahara to death, so that I could become his agent, and Bailan is the link that led me to fall into this dark plan, so he can survive. And now, I met Bailan in advance and learned everything from him. Thinking of this, a sudden flash of inspiration came to his mind. Wait, what if Bailan didn't meet me here? No, with White Zetsu's Mayfly technique, Madara must know that I have encountered Bailan, but he doesn't know that I actually knew everything a long time ago, and knew what his Moon Eye plan was. With this information gap, I can buy some more time. Uchiha Chi pondered for a moment, and once again set his gaze on Bailan, who was lying dead on the ground, with the cold light flashing in his eyes, and this may be an opportunity, a chance to kill Uchiha Madara. As the words fell, Uchiha Chi took a deep breath and immediately formed hand seals, unleashing the curse seal body invasion technique he'd learned from the book Orochimaru had given him, records and methods of experimental suppression of the heavenly curse seal. With the seals completed, Uchiha Chi squatted down, raised his left palm, and pressed it against Bailan's neck. A white, crescent-shaped curse seal, imperceptible to the unwary, quietly imprinted itself upon the third Mizukage's neck. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 331 The curtain rises and the strategy is decided. After placing the curse seal on the third Mizukage, Uchiha Chi decisively turned and departed. His desire to rewrite the world's fate, to alter the tragedies that befell his companions, to forge a world that unfolded according to his own will, inevitably led him to confront the most oppressive villain, Uchiha Madara. But now was not the time to confront him head-on. Uchiha Chi still had a considerable distance to reach his opponent. Even in the best-case scenario, with Nagato summoning the Outer Path Demon statue to forcibly expel Madara's tubes, and Uchiha Chi attempting an assassination during the period when Madara summoned the Outer Path Demon statue back to life, the chances of success were extremely slim. Even without eyes, Uchiha Madara could summon a fully formed Susanoo and unleash the power of the Rinnegan Six Paths. Putting aside the power of the Six Paths of the Rinnegan, even the fully formed Susanoo itself is on another level. And even Uchiha Chi's most powerful attack yet, the illuminating Greatsword, 8 million divine pressure, is barely enough to break its defense. If something goes wrong and Uchiha Madara connects back to the Outer Path Demon statue, Using boundless chakra to summon dozens of long-legged Susanus to chase and attack you, Uchiha Chi will have no patience. To compete on the same level as Uchiha Madara, who lacks the Rinnegan, the only way is to transform the offensive power of the illuminating greatsword, 8 million divine pressure into a basic attack, and strengthen one's own defense to a point where it's even stronger than Susanoo. Uchiha Chi already possesses this path, further advancement of sage form, plus, 9 tails chakra amplification, plus, tailed beast level chakra capacity. Even without awakening his main Gekyo Sharingan, Uchiha Chi can achieve strength and hardness even beyond Susanoo. This is the confidence that the strength of heart gives Uchiha Chi. He already possesses the 9 tails chakra that strengthens his body, all he needs is mastery. Even tailed beast level chakra capacity can be achieved through Orochimaru's methods. The next step is to journey to Kame Island and explore the limits of sage form. Soon, Uchiha Chi returned to the Thunder Ship, a heap of rotten metal, floating on the sea, its various parts floating on the surface. Using his Sharingan, he carefully searched and quickly found the instrument for determining direction. After determining his direction, he strode across the water, heading north. Kame Island lay just ahead, and he had to reach it and turn it around, leaving this place before Uchiha Madara arrived. An hour later, a massive shadow suddenly loomed over the sea. Drifting from the distance, a massive humanoid creature, its color and body like a dead tree, sat cross-legged, over 100 meters above the surface. Its 9 eyes were closed, its hands bound tightly with heavy iron chains. Atop this behemoth, known as the Outer Path Demon statue, sat an old man, one knee bent, a sickle at his side. His hair was gray, his frame gaunt, but his crimson eyes shone with a cold, disdainful gaze. After a moment's silence, a white Zetsu descended from below, carrying 2 figures. The only ones who are still alive besides Madara-sama are Afeti and the third Mizukage. Oh? He's still alive. Uchiha Madara frowned slightly and glanced at Bailan who was lying unconscious at his feet, with a hint of impatience in his eyes. Swish, the azure giant palm of Susanoo picked up the third Mizukage and squeezed it slightly. Ugh, Bailan, who was still unconscious, was like a chicken being pinched, his eyes suddenly bulged out. At this moment, Uchiha Madara glanced at him indifferently, and the 3 Magatama in his scarlet Sharingan spun slightly, and instantly followed the other's lifeless eyes, and invaded Bailan's brain with his pupil power, and began to read memories. After a long moment, Uchiha Madara tossed the third Mizukage aside like trash, a smile playing on his face. HMPH, have you discovered someone is secretly controlling this puppet, so you've erased all traces of your presence and chosen to leave without alerting them, and you're even trying to create a false trap by implanting false memories to lure out the person behind this? Uchiha Madara shook his head and chuckled with amusement. Then, as you wish, but then, you have to take this trip to the Water Kingdom. I will show you the truth of this world, until you are willing to accept this. Uchiha Madara suddenly stood up, scythe in hand, and said coldly, Moon Eye Project. At the same time, in the Land of Lightning, Yunming City. In a remote, now deserted part of the city, within a Baroque-style building. A quarrel was echoing in the air. Orange-haired Yohiko slammed the table and looked at Madarumi on the other side of the map with dissatisfaction. Nagato and Konan stood aside, looking at each other in confusion as the quarrel became more and more intense. On the other side of the room, the other wanted men sat there daydreaming, as if the quarrel here had nothing to do with them. Why the Land of Water? Yohiko asked angrily, pointing to the Land of Water on the map. Madarumi, who was being questioned, said with a firm face, I've explained that the Land of Rain is located between the 3 countries. Even if, as you said, there is no daimyo in this country, the process of transformation will not be hindered by any daimyo forces, but have you ever thought about, once a war breaks out, this place will inevitably bear the brunt. War is not a joke as you say. What about recruiting people and forming an organization that is independent of the 5 major countries, intimidating the 5 major countries and preventing war? If the newly recruited members are forced to be involved in the war and die because of your ridiculous reasons, then who is intimidating whom? Hearing this, Yohiko instinctively glanced sideways at Nagato and blushed. No. You want to say that you are strong? How about compared to Uchiha Chi? Madarumi snorted coldly, not at all nervous, and slapped the map and retorted, that guy didn't accept your invitation. Don't you understand why? It's because you are too naive. Both the ideas in the past and the ideas now are too naive. That guy was a madman who said that he would flatten the 5 major countries by himself when he had nothing. It doesn't matter whether you are there or not, you want to force him to do dangerous things, but you will become a hindrance to him and a thing for him to worry about. Do you understand? Maid Arumi took a deep breath, clenched her fists, and said angrily, he is an incurable idiot, an idiot who would rather sacrifice himself than let anyone around him sacrifice themselves. Yohiko was so excited that his face turned red. He angrily waved away the paper in his hand, looked directly at Maid Arumi, gritted his teeth and asked, what about you? You say such high-sounding words, but you just want Uchiha-Chi's power to help you control the Water Kingdom. After all, we are all selfish creatures. How much better are you? After hearing such blunt and ruthless words, Maid Arumi was silent for a moment, then she raised her head, her clear green eyes gleaming with a light that showed she was unwilling to admit defeat. No, I'm different from you. Uchiha will not accept your invitation, nor will he join Akatsuki. That's why I came here, to persuade you. I have a way. Let Uchiha join Akatsuki. Chapter 332, Bro, where's my 500 million? They raced northward for nearly 50 nautical miles from the sea. A thin mist gradually rose from the surface, and moonlight refracted through it, casting a suffocatingly large shadow upon the approaching Uchiha. It was a massive island, approximately 10 kilometers in diameter, dotted with spiky stone pillars. A living island. Is this the island turtle? Uchiha slowly stopped, raised his hand, and summoned something resembling a lantern from a sealing scroll. Within it was a magic potion, specially formulated by Orochimaru, that emitted a unique aura to ward off the island turtle's ill will. To prevent Kumagakure from finding the island turtle and reclaiming it, Orochimaru used the magic potion on it, controlling its will. If it sensed a ninja within a kilometer radius, the island turtle would spontaneously erupt, its 10-kilometer-long body unleashing a torrent of trance-like waves, equivalent to an S-level ninjutsu for ninjas. Using the waves and other backup techniques Orochimaru had left, it would escape. Although the island turtle appears enormous and its movement seems incredibly slow in the original novel, that's only compared to the flight of Inoki, his 3 companions, and Itara. In reality, ordinary ships wouldn't even be able to see the island turtle's taillights. This is why Uchiha took out his lantern. Carrying the lantern, he sailed nearly a nautical mile before finally reaching Turtle Island. Uchiha first headed for the island turtle's skull, entering through its mountain-like mouth. Following the map Orochimaru had left behind, he found the island turtle's brain. The brain's contents resembled a vast cavern. Amidst the crimson brain stood spikes formed by the 4 black snakes formation, reminiscent of the rudder of Uchiha's earlier thundership. This was used to change the island turtle's direction. Fortunately, Orochimaru didn't overdo it, the buttons were a foolproof operation. After a nervous struggle following the map, Uchiha finally managed to change the island turtle's direction. That way, we won't encounter Uchiha Madara again at sea. With a sigh of relief, Uchiha put away the sealing scroll in his hand and turned towards the interior of the island, the place known as the True Waterfall. Before leaving the battle site, to prevent Uchiha Madara from pursuing him, he performed a complex operation in Balan's mind. It was a bit convoluted. To prevent Uchiha Madara from catching up, Uchiha first erased all traces of his presence in Balan and Ofei's minds. However, the Sharingan's illusion manipulation was naturally flawed by the Sharingan's mastery. Then, Uchiha deliberately tampered with the Balan's memory, creating a false memory and leaving a landmark that, to the untrained eye, looked nothing like a trap. Since the target was Madara, given his pride, after having his 2 disguises exposed, his first impulse would be to turn the tables and crush all of Uchiha's schemes with sheer force. Furthermore, from Madara's perspective, Uchiha was unaware of his existence. At most, he could sense the existence of someone behind the 3rd Mizukage through Balan's distorted memories. But how could a normal ninja possibly guess that the person behind the 3rd Mizukage was actually a long-dead historical figure? In reality, even though Balan's images of Madara's existence were hazy and revealed no clear information, Uchiha was still able to reconstruct the entire incident with a high degree of accuracy, drawing on the original storyline and a wealth of ninja knowledge. This was his advantage. The risky move of using the Sharingan to leave a backup plan would only intensify Madara's disdain for this backup plan after he had pierced through the initial disguise, leading to his dismissive reaction of just some clever trick upon seeing it. Once Madara had satisfied the pleasure of the Sharingan revealing no secrets, it was clear what his next thoughts would be. After all, this was a clever trick aimed at Madara, driven by a focus on the outcome. Simple, yet not simple. Playing genjutsu with a 100-year-old man, what a thrill. The entire way, Uchiha Chi worried that Uchiha Madara wouldn't fall for his trick, that he'd catch up halfway, then wield his fully formed Susanoo and strike him down, knocking him unconscious and taking him back to be the Moonlight Project's execution slave. Huh? He let out another long sigh, but Uchiha Chi still felt a chill running down his spine, purely from his own fear. After all, that was the ultimate boss, even scarier than the final villain, Uchiha Madara. While he suspected he might favor him, who knew if the old man, upon touching the real thing, would feel the difference and simply chop him down and replace him. The real waterfall was located on the shell of the island Turtle, which formed the outer part of Turtle Island. Amidst a forest of stone pillars that seemed to pierce the sky, stood numerous houses built by the Kumagakure clan. The overall style was realistic, continuing the Kumagakure tradition of mountain-dwelling buildings and incorporating numerous elements of the tailed beasts. Nearby, a gigantic ape named Kin guarded the buildings. However, for unknown reasons, after glancing at Uchiha Chi from the stone forest, it fled as if facing a formidable enemy. Uchiha Chi then smoothly reached the hidden spot between the stone forests, the True Falls. According to the original text, Uchiha Chi observed the nearly 100-meter-high waterfall before him, his gaze fixed on a raised earthen platform in front of it. If you sit on it, you can see your true self. This is also the first step to achieving perfect Jinchuriki mode, to defeat yourself. But what does my true self look like? With this thought, Uchiha Chi shook his head, stepped forward across the lake's surface, sat cross-legged in the center of the platform, and closed his eyes. The moment he closed his eyes, Uchiha Chi, relying on the sensitivity of his sage transformation body to the natural energy around him, immediately felt a strange power generating around him. The natural energy of the lush environment, flowing in a unique pattern beneath this strange, spiked terrain, gradually formed a barrier encompassing a kilometer in radius. And then, with a Sharingan's keen sense of spiritual power, Uchiha Chi suddenly realized that his consciousness was being slowly ripped from his body. Then, he heard a voice identical to his own. Uchiha Chi. The voice was urgent, tense, and trembling, tinged with extreme anger. Have you forgotten the purpose of your coming to this world? What the hell are you doing? If you keep going like this, even aliens won't be able to kill you. I ask you. Blood splattered all over his head and face, wearing a torn t-shirt, his body riddled with broken glass and twisted steel. An oversized 18-year-old Uchiha Chi stumbled weakly out of the waterfall, a look of shock and disbelief on his face. He reached out a trembling hand, pointed at Uchiha Chi's nose, and demanded blankly, 3 months, just 3 months, how the hell did you almost become a super shadow, and, dude, where are my 500 million? Chapter 333 Me and My Determination. Dude, where's my 500 million? Hearing this question, filled with bewilderment, helplessness, anger, and resignedness, Uchiha Chi's eyes snapped open. As if in a dream, he was stunned to see his former self before the time travel. No, rather, this was his own soul state when he left Konoha 3 months prior. His thoughts were locked away in the past, the day he was crushed to death by a dump truck a year ago. He had become utterly withdrawn, refusing any offers from the outside world. He grumbled and buried himself in missions, living an ascetic life, attempting to die suddenly or in endless D-rank missions. Uchiha Chi stammered at this question, unsure how to explain it to himself. In a fleeting moment, powered by his Sharingan and his sage-like form, he had fully grasped the workings of this waterfall of reality. In theory, this was a pure, unique Yin-Tun Senjutsu, a fusion of the natural energy stirred by the spiked stone pillars of Turtle Island and the spiritual energy of those seated there. Uchiha Chi simply named it Senjutsu, 2 sides of one body. It draws upon the practitioner's chakra, then uses natural energy to split this chakra, imbued with spiritual will, into 2 parts in a yin-yang structure, creating a self with identical strength within a unique barrier. But at this moment, Uchiha Chi could clearly sense that this clone possessed only a pitiful amount of chakra, insufficient to even perform a single great snake-style substitution jutsu. A single casual strike from him would instantly defeat this clone physically. This was because the Senjutsu heart, imbued with a terrifying amount of natural energy, could not be replicated. After all, Turtle Island itself lacked that much natural energy. However, the condition for triggering the real waterfall mechanism before him, allowing the practitioner to enter the Hall of Truth, was not defeat, but rather self-recognition. In other words, Uchiha Chi must make his self 3 months ago, who is his dark side, recognize his current self. Thinking of this, Uchiha Chi suddenly felt overwhelmed. After all, he was the one who knew himself best. 3 months ago, he was a problem youth who would rather die than turn back. However, he could only try to speak, "Brother, However, before he could finish 4 words, the big Uchiha Chi suddenly pulled out a steel bar stuck in his forehead with an angry look and threw it to the ground. "Shut up, you're done, Uchiha Chi. You've been corrupted by the evil capitalism. Do you still have any idea about my 500 million in your mind now?" Bang! The steel bar hit the ground with a resounding thud, and a column of blood spurted out from the forehead of the large Uchiha Chi. Seeing the blood, Uchiha Chi felt his scalp tingle. He hurried over, attempting to use cellular expulsion to heal himself, fearing that he would die in front of him. "No, buddy, calm down. We need to calm down. We can talk about it, huh?" The young Uchiha Chi raised his eyebrows, furious. He slapped Uchiha Chi's hand away. "Talk about it? What the hell, Uchiha Chi? Have you forgotten how much we fought to get this condition? From the day countless accidents happened, billboards fell, ceilings broke, bridges collapsed, people were held hostage by bank robbers, there were fires, serial explosions, a bus was almost smashed by a high-speed train. Someone smoking on the high-speed train caused the entire carriage to catch fire, and even when I was sitting at home drinking a sip of water, I almost got electrocuted because of a short circuit in the old wires. That stupid Shinodai company really stuffed a sugar-coated bullet in your mouth, and you don't even know it. Who got this Shinodai insurance in the first place? That was the way to survive. We fought with a stupid company for 3 days and 3 nights. Tell me honestly, tell me." The young man Uchiha Chi's face was very solemn, so solemn that he was almost crying. He grabbed Uchiha Chi's collar, his hand was covered with thick blood, and his face was distorted to the point of being hideous. It was a look of madness, as if all his efforts were ruthlessly overturned, and everything he had paid for was in vain, and he was forced into a desperate situation. Without the Sharingan, without the blood dragon eyes, without the golden snake pupils of a sage, they were more terrifying and appalling than any other gaze. Stared at by such eyes, pressed with such frenzy. "Now, do you still have the 500 million we agreed upon?" Faced with this question, Uchiha Chi suddenly fell silent. He had nothing to say. Time ticked by. Seeing Uchiha Chi like this, looking at the young self before him, completely accepting this body form and thus transforming the form of his soul, the young Uchiha Chi froze, as if all the strength had been drained from him. He let go of Uchiha Chi's collar and stumbled back 2 steps. He knew that even if you performed the impure world reincarnation now, it would be this childlike self that would be summoned, not him. It was a profound irony and betrayal. When he thought of this, the young man Uchiha Chi raised his head and revealed a miserable and crazy smile. The next moment, his face turned ferocious, and he suddenly pulled out a bumper piece like a long knife from his shoulder, and then pointed it at his neck. Seeing this scene, Uchiha Chi's face changed, and he subconsciously wanted to step forward to stop him. However, the young Uchiha Chi put the bumper across his neck with a cold expression and stared at him coldly. "Don't move, you know, in my current physical condition, I have many ways to kill myself." Then, he asked in a cold voice, "This is the real waterfall. I didn't expect that you have come here. Choosing to join Kumagakure is also a good choice. You can avoid the night of genocide and have enough time to develop. And now, do you want to become a perfect Jinchuriki? Let me guess, which tailed beast have you captured? Is it the 7 tails, or have you taken advantage of the plot of the legend of Minato to secretly kill Uzumaki Kushina and seize the 9 tails? But no matter what you choose," he sank his face into the huge shadow under the waterfall, staring at Uchiha Chi coldly. "I am despairing of the future of this world." The young Uchiha Chi raised his chin at Uchiha Chi, revealing a hideous and crazy smile, and without hesitation pressed the long sword into his neck. "So, listen, I won't let you succeed, no matter what your reasons are. Don't try to stop me, don't try to stop me from going home." Chapter 334, Mural of Sun and Moon, Headless Hungry Immortal. Listening to these words emanating from his own mouth, and taking such extreme actions, Uchiha Chi's face was filled with resignation. However, he wasn't afraid of the other party's suicide. With his current abilities, even if the young Uchiha Chi severed his head right then and there, his own, with the forbidden techniques of flesh reincarnation, rebirth, and recell expulsion, would be enough to resurrect him countless times from the same spot. The solution to his current situation was actually quite simple. He simply needed to use his Sharingan to present his past 3 months' experiences to him in the form of a Jinjutsu. After receiving his present memories, Uchiha Chi was confident that his past self would make the same choices as he had at every crucial juncture, gradually gaining a deeper understanding of himself. Reconciling with his past self wouldn't be difficult. However, Uchiha Chi didn't need or want to make such a move. Why should he reconcile with his past self? How could a remnant soul, possessing only a fragment of his own spiritual energy and possessing some meaningless information, represent him? For Uchiha Chi, the memories of these 3 months were far more important than Turtle Island. Even if it was himself standing before him, there were some things he wouldn't share with himself. Was he going to give up his most precious possessions just to walk through this door? Moreover, in this unfamiliar environment, handing over his most precious memories, along with intelligence that could overthrow the entire ninja world, would be a betrayal of everything he'd experienced and carried along with him, all the hopes and dreams he'd carried along the way. So it's up to you. If you want to die, then die. Uchiha Chi raised his head and looked at the other party calmly. He paused, then said lightly, ninjas have to climb over the wall because it is the easiest way, and it would be more troublesome to jump over it. For ninjas, it is also possible to move forward by smashing the wall. The young man Uchiha Chi, who was holding the bumper across his neck, was stunned for a moment. What did you say? However, when the words fell, Uchiha Chi had already raised his head, lighting up a pair of scarlet Sharingan, staring at the tall waterfall in front of him, and the surroundings that seemed to cut the world in half, and the illusory boundary full of white light in the distance. With the help of a unique formation, it absorbs the natural energy within a radius of 1 kilometer, and forms such a sophisticated barrier technique that only accommodates spiritual power, and this waterfall is composed of the same principle as the secret water escape technique, water mirror technique of Karojutsu Yagare that I saw before. Tisk. Are the roots of immortal techniques and ninjutsu the same? Sure enough. This is the civilization of immortals before the ninja era. Thinking of this, Uchiha Chi's face condensed slightly, and he slowly closed his eyes. At this time, the young man Uchiha Chi beside him couldn't help but look at him with astonishment on his face. What are you talking about? Didn't you come to Turtle Island to become a perfect Jinchuriki? In 3 months, even with the intelligence advantage, how could you make any further progress? Uchiha Chi. What on earth are you? However, hearing this, Uchiha Chi shook his head slightly. Tail beast, why would you run so far to enslave that kind of beast? He then took a step forward, standing before the real waterfall, his back to the young Uchiha Chi. Let me put it this way, I'm far more powerful than you imagine. As he finished speaking, Uchiha Chi suddenly opened his scarlet, snake-like Sharingan, raised his fist, and aimed it at the waterfall. The veins on his right fist, along with the suddenly appearing celestial patterns, pulsed ferociously and madly. The next moment, like a gusher, a brilliant, bright yellow beam instantly filled the young Uchiha Chi's entire field of vision, causing him to open his eyes wide in astonishment. Holy shit! What the hell is that? Boom! With a deafening roar, the barrier shattered. Simultaneously, in the real world, Uchiha Chi maintained the exact same movements as within the spiritual barrier. White celestial patterns flowed across his arm, and a wisp of green smoke drifted away from the tip of his fist. But before him, the massive real waterfall had vanished. The entire mountaintop had been shattered by a single blow, taking with it the barrier that had created the inner darkness. A gurgling stream of water flowed down from the corners of the vast pit, forming a semi-square curtain of water, revealing a vast, mysterious space within. Hush! Uchiha Chi opened his eyes, exhaled, stretched his right hand, and used the celestial technique, heavenly initiation, to ease the strain from his taut arm muscles. He raised his head and stepped into the cave entrance. This must be the second level of Turtle Island's training ground. What he saw was a vast underground palace, dotted with towering pagodas. Behind the pagodas, carved into the wall, over 600 meters high, was a giant bull-headed beast with 8 octopus tails, and a massive cat demon, its body ablaze with flames, its tails erected. From the entrance to the underground palace's beast-headed gate, which stretched to the end of the site, 11 stone statues of seated, headless figures stood on either side, for a total of 21. Near the gate stood a single stone statue with a complete head. The statue wore monk's attire, stone Buddhist beads adorning its headless neck. Its hands formed a variation of the way, unclear, sign, or, gave a thumbs up, seemingly in a gesture of approval. As Uchiha Chi approached, his gaze lingered for a moment on the statue's approving hand. Then, He continued walking until he reached the end of the road, in front of the beast-headed gate with blood stained its mouth. According to the description of Killer Bee in the original work, Uchiha Chi looked around the underground palace, frowning slightly. Every stone statue here is a Jinchuriki who failed in his practice. However, the land of lightning where Kumagakure is located is not like the land of wind and fire. There are many monks, and there are eminent monks like the fire temple in Bonfuku. At the same time, there is no precedent of practicing Buddhism in Kumagakure. The previous 8 tails Jinchuriki, Bulibi, also looks like a normal ninja, therefore, it can be judged that this sentence is a lie. It was used to fool Uzumaki Naruto when entering the third space, to scare him into sticking his head in to open the door, and when Naruto, Killer Bee and Yamato entered this place, what Killer Bee said when introducing this place to the two was the truth. Therefore, there is another hidden story here. Thinking of this, Uchiha Chi walked to the end of the road, frowned and glanced at the huge beast-headed gate in front of him, looking at the dry black blood between the teeth of the beast head. This is the gate to the training grounds on Kame Island. Inside, one can encounter the tailed beasts sealed within their bodies and master the means to steal their chakra. Killer Bee once said that the only way to enter is to stick one's head inside. Anyone harboring darkness in their heart will be instantly bitten off by the statue. Only those without darkness in their hearts can open the gate. Naruto then thrust his head inside and, after joking with Yamato, claimed that there was only a doorway inside. Killer Bee also laughed and said it was just a joke. But Uchiha Chi glanced at the stone statue's beast head, seeing the dark blood between its teeth and the faint scent of stinking snake blood. Was this really a joke? Naruto had overcome the true falls to enter, meeting Killer Bee's requirements, so he wouldn't have triggered the mechanism. But what would have happened if Yamato had thrust his head inside? Thinking of this, Uchiha Chi raised an eyebrow, then simply thrust his head inside the beast head. He hadn't come to terms with his inner darkness like Naruto had, but Uchiha Chi had his own advantages. Everything before him quickly fell into darkness. Inside the beast's head, Uchiha Chi didn't see the switch that opened the gate as Naruto had seen. However, within his mutated Sharingan vision, he could see natural energy swirling in a strange pattern. Is this a visual illusion powered by natural energy? The next moment, as if sensing something, the beast's eyes suddenly glowed red, and its upper and lower jaws snapped shut. Crack! Blood spurted out, and Uchiha Chi's head instantly separated from his body, falling to the ground. Fortunately, this situation wouldn't kill him. He leaned forward, reached out and picked up the fallen head, placing it on his head. The bowl-sized scar on his neck healed instantly. Uchiha Chi, now fully recovered, stood up, his face filled with surprise, as if he had discovered a new world. Huh? A senjutsu, a jinjutsu. What a gem. However, before Uchiha Chi could reach in to observe it further, perhaps even try to record it with his Sharingan, suddenly, boom, the entire underground palace shook violently. A rustling sound. Huge rubble peeled off from the 600-meter-high stone wall, revealing behind it a massive, yet dull, carving of a blazing sun, a brilliant outline but a dark interior. Above the blazing sun, a larger crimson moon, swirling with 9 jet black magatama, connected to it by a tree trunk and continuously drawing power to the other side, was visible. At this moment, the stone statues, previously seated silently on either side of the road, began to stir. They clutched their hearts, grabbed their throats, and tore at their bellies. The 21 headless statues used their hands to make all sorts of excruciating gestures. The headed statue, seated in the foreground, clutched its ears, its eyes glazed over, its mouth wide open, howling. In the silence, Uchiha Chi could tell from the movement of its teeth opening and closing its mouth that it was straining to utter 3 words, hungry, so hungry. Chapter 335, Heavy History. The 5 nation talks are held. Atop a 600-meter-high wall, the murals that once depicted the 2-tailed and 8-tailed beasts peeled away, revealing a terrifying object beneath. This is truly unbelievable. Uchiha Chi couldn't help but shudder as he gazed upon the headless Buddha statues, howling in agony, and the murals that contained a vast amount of information at a glance. The history of the ninja world, from the Warring States period onward, was essentially a blank canvas. A year ago, Uchiha Chi had verified this fact in Konoha's library and the family academy. Of course, the major families undoubtedly possessed some secret, forbidden knowledge passed down orally, but with the passage of time, much like the future Uchiha Itachi's mastery of Izanami, The truth is passed down by others can be distorted by their own mindsets, leading to distortion of history. Even the historical roots of the technique were distorted, to the point where the Uchiha, the founder of Izanami, wore a Konoha for a protector, a rather absurd feat. Izanami and Izanagi clearly belong to the same era. If this technique was created after Konoha's founding, then what about the forbidden technique used by Uchiha Madara, who defected long ago? In short, a force has always lurked within the fabric of history, obscuring, distorting, and blurring the course of past events. This force is Black Zetsu, son of Kaguya Otsutsuki, who has lurked in the ninja world for millennia, secretly manipulating the course of history. Undoubtedly, through faith in the Two Tails or the Eight Tails, or perhaps for some other purpose, the recreation of the mural here concealed this astonishing revelation, shielding it from Black Zetsu's gaze. This information has thus been passed down to the present day, and quite possibly, it's the only surviving glimpse into the world before the age of ninjas. And then, boom, before Uchiha could decipher the hidden meaning behind this information, the sound of a mechanism suddenly resounded within the vast, empty underground palace. A large door slowly opened beside Uchiha. Unlike the dreamlike room that Naruto Killer Bee entered in the original story, filled with white light that reached deep into the soul, this doorway was filled with pitch darkness. It felt as if countless wailing souls lingered before it, lingering in its wake, a foreboding omen. However, with his transformed Sharingan, Uchiha was able to pierce the black mist surrounding the door and vaguely discern a single altar. Atop this altar rested a jade pendant. Coincidentally, Uchiha had seen this pendant before. It was the same Magatama pendant worn by the Emperor of the Ancestral Kingdom countless years ago. It was a silent object, lost in the infinite Tsukuyomi, the last person to be hanged from the sacred tree, ending an entire era. Elsewhere, in the land of lightning, in Yunming City, time passed. In a blink of an eye, 5 days had passed since Uchiha issued the assassination declaration. Yunming City is also restoring order from the riots and chaos. In the center of the city, the towering castle tower has entered the final stage of its work under the power of the ninja. Accompanied by a group of newly promoted officials, they walked quickly, stepped onto the brand new high walls, and faced the people of the entire city. The decree issued to the entire Kingdom of Thunder will be implemented in all directions tomorrow. Our country will hold a 5-nation meeting in the castle tower and invite envoys from the 5 countries to attend. The traitor Uchiha, who caused trouble in Yunming City a few days ago and attempted to assassinate the daimyo, has been listed as an S-class traitor in Konoha and will be wanted in the 5 major countries, various small countries, and even the entire ninja world. His accomplices are Kokuzu, Mainjetsu Kazuki, Yohiko, Nagato, Konan, Hidden, Scorpion of the Red Sand, and the nameless person in this portrait. If anyone finds the whereabouts of the 9 members of this terrorist organization, they can report to the daimyo of each country, and there will be a reward, following closely behind. As the bounties on the bounties were read out one by one, the people below exclaimed in surprise. Konoha's S-rank traitor, Uchiha Clan, Uchiha bounty, 1 billion ryo. Takinin S-rank traitor, Kokuzu, terminate his cooperation with the gold exchange, bounty, 80 million ryo. Beneath the city wall, the hooded figure of Nishiro N chuckled at the bounty amounts and glanced at Kokuzu. After carefully examining him, he asked curiously, Mr. Kokuzu, I heard you're a bounty hunting ninja who makes money by hunting bounty targets, but now, you can't even survive at the underground gold exchange, and that brat seems to have been your target before. Honestly, I've always found it hard to understand why you chose to do that 6 days ago. Miyashiro narrowed his eyes and stared at Kokuzu in front of him with a scrutinizing look. And, why do you stay here all the time? Even if Uchiha is not here, you still refuse to leave? 5 days ago, those who had come for Uchiha joined the Akatsuki organization under the persuasion of Madarumi and Yohiko. Since Akatsuki operated in teams of 2, IGN had taken the initiative to partner with Kokuzu. His seemingly casual question at this moment was precisely why he had chosen to be on the same team with Kokuzu. Regardless of the usefulness of this newly formed organization, for IGN, Uchiha, who had promised to assassinate the daimyo and was so powerful, was his best partner at this moment. He would never allow Uchiha to be betrayed for some vulgar reason before paving the way for him to assassinate him. So, after a brief understanding of the current state of the ninja world and the members of this strange organization, He spontaneously came to keep an eye on the seemingly most unreliable person in the organization at this time, Kokuzu. At this moment, Kokuzu, standing next to Oejien, wearing a black robe and a half-mask, heard this and glanced at Oejien with his dark green eyes, but his face was expressionless, as if he didn't care about the temptation in Oejien's words. He just looked at him indifferently and said lightly, "You are right, I am a bounty ninja, and money is like a river. If you block one side, it will naturally flow to the other side. So, of course I have found a better employer." Oh, Miyashiro-en's eyes narrowed, and after hearing these blunt words, he looked at Kokuzu and his eyes suddenly turned cold, and a dangerous red light quietly revealed the corners in his eyes. However, at this time, Kokuzu glanced at Miyashiro-en impatiently. "Put away your murderous intent. I am not as patient as you think." Then, he raised his hand slightly, pointed at the tall inner city wall in front of him and snorted, "And, idiot. You don't really want to follow the naive idea of that orange-haired kid and dream of cramming at the last minute, go in there to explore the route of infiltration?" Miyashiro-en was stunned. Kokuzu looked at him like he was idiot, as if the old man before him had read his mind completely. For a moment, he was confused as to who possessed the blood dragon eye. Their group, tasked by Yohiko, was indeed to investigate the strength of this section of the city wall and possible routes to intrude upon the castle tower from this direction. This wasn't difficult for Miyashiro-en. All he needed to do was hypnotize him with his eye technique and interrogate a few ninja. However, Kokuzu clearly had his own ideas. Without turning back, he marched forward, heading against a flow of people towards the densely populated area on the edge of Yunming City. He gave Miyashiro-en a cold, idiotic look. "If you truly wish to help that brat and achieve your goal," he replied, "then follow me. Your reckless ideas will only expose you and lead us into a trap long prepared by Kumagakure. Now, follow me to meet our employer, the Uchiha clan." Chapter 336 There is a traitor among us. Knock, knock. There were knocks on the door of the house at the end of a secluded alley. Kokuzu and the others waited for a long time, but there seemed to be no response. From the doorway, through the gaping wooden planks, they could see the interior, a desolate scene of cobwebs, long untouched. The faint meows of wildcats echoed faintly from the surroundings. Miyagi-en frowned, surveying his surroundings. He glanced at Kokuzu in front of him, a look of slight disapproval on his face. "Mr. Kokuzu, do you think such a desolate place could hold the most confidential information in Yunming City? I'm telling you, don't waste your time, okay?" For Miyagi-en, having spent most of his 20 years in Hell Valley scrounging for food, the term desolate was already a rather harsh description. And the scene before him was exactly as Miyagi-en had described, a desolate street that didn't even look like it was inhabited. However, upon hearing this, Kokuzu merely glanced at him and remained silent, seemingly disinclined to pay any attention to Miyashiro-en. He persisted, knocking once more on the door of the dilapidated house. Dong dong. Suddenly, a dark figure leaped from the roof. "My two distinguished guests, please follow me." Meow. The agile figure that descended was an orange ninja cat in a red coat. It looked exactly like Hina, the ninja cat summoned by Uchiha Fugaku. At that moment, Hina stood up towards the two men, pointed at a nearby wall, and leaped forward. Suddenly, a ripple rose from the wall, sending the ninja cat careening through it. At this moment, Kokuzu said calmly, "Let's go. The barrier is open, illusion, even my blood dragon eyes can't see through it." Seeing this, Miyashiro-en was stunned, a look of astonishment in his eyes. He hurriedly followed Kokuzu into the wall. With one step outside, the scene before him suddenly changed. From a desolate, run-down, uninhabited, smelly street, he suddenly arrived at the interior of a vast, luxurious courtyard. In front of the gate, a ninja dressed in Uchiha attire stepped out. He looks to be barely 20 years old, but his eyes are shining with a pair of scarlet three-magatama Sharingan. The people guarding the gate are all such young three-magatama men? Who are these guys in there? Miyashiro-en raised his eyebrows and couldn't help but secretly complain. The Uchiha ninja had already stepped forward at this time, and after looking at the two of them, he said calmly, "You two, my name is Uchiha Chiichiro. After the conversation with the elders, you can come to me for detailed information on all matters in the Land of Lightning." After Chiichiro introduced himself, he led the two of them to the tall house in the courtyard. Passing through the mansion's long corridor, the three soon arrived at a tea room. Chiichiro opened the door and extended his hand. The two peered inside, only to find a middle-aged man and a young man seated at attention. The middle-aged man was Uchiha Kaguya, the candidate for the Uchiha clan's future elder, who had served as Uchiha Chi's swordsmanship instructor during the Jigakudani era. He had also demonstrated remarkable wisdom, capable of persuading powerful figures like Kakuzu, and was considered the right-hand man of the Grand Elder, Uchiha Setsuna. Passing by this familiar figure, Kakuzu, standing in front of the door, couldn't help but glance at the square-faced young man sitting beside Uchiha Kaguya. Since Jigakudani, Uchiha Kaguya had been in charge of Uchiha Kaguya's communications, but he had never seen this young man before. Moreover, he felt a strange, unforgettable sense of pressure from him. Is this fellow, Evil Eyes Uchiha Fugaku? Before the two men who had entered the tea room could think, Uchiha Huagwang, a clan elder, quickly pulled a scroll from his bosom, placed it on the table, and looked at the two. Kakuzu, this is the Yunming inner city defense map you need. After taking out the scroll, Uchiha Huagwang glanced at Miyashiro-en beside Kakuzu. His gaze paused for a moment before he asked bluntly, Sir, should I call you Miyashiro-en? Or Miyashiro of the Pond of Blood, Miyashiro-en? Okay, Uchiha Huagwang nodded, first looking at Miyashiro-en. I'm a warrior and don't like beating around the bush. Let's get straight to the point, let's put the past disputes aside for now, Miyashiro-en. The black market personnel you've recruited underground in Yunming City have alarmed quite a few forces. We've already dealt with some of the manipulation for you. We can also take charge of the arena and underground black market you want to build and invest in you. Also, we've brought your daughter back to the Uchiha clan for protection. As soon as the words fell, a pin drop could be heard in the tea room. Hearing Uchiha Huagwang's final words, Miyashiro-en was stunned for a moment, his eyes instantly reddening. What did you say? He slammed the table, sending a violent chakra surge through his surroundings. At this moment, Uchiha Fugaku, who had been sitting quietly beside him, sipping his tea, suddenly opened his eyes and locked eyes with Miyashiro-en. The invisible illusory exchange quickly ended with a casting of the main Gekaioi technique, Tsukuyomi. A moment later, Miyashiro-en sat down obediently. You seek to use Uchiha Chi for revenge, but Chi's life or death is of no concern to you. You're the most restless element in this newly formed organization, that's why Kakuzu brought you here. Hearing this, Miyashiro-en's mouth twitched slightly, and he whipped his head around, glaring angrily at Kakuzu. He had started this game of find the traitor, but at the very end, Miyashiro-en discovered that the traitor was actually me. Uchiha Huagwang glanced calmly at the two men, each with a different expression, and said calmly, So, whether you think I'm despicable or inhumane, whatever, during tomorrow's assassination, Miyashiro-en, I need you to make one thing clear, Uchiha Chi's life is above all else. Then, Uchiha Huagwang turned to look at Kakuzu, and after a moment's thought, he asked, also, regarding this organization called Akatsuki, Kakuzu, I need you to explain it to me. Why did you choose to join Akatsuki? Having resolved the unstable factor of Miyashiro-en, Kakuzu breathed a sigh of relief, his eyes narrowed slightly, and he felt refreshed. In response to Uchiha Huagwang's question, he raised his green eyes and thought for a moment. Then, he pulled a ring from his sleeve that could be worn on the middle finger. The word North was engraved on the ring. This is the North Ring among the 10 commandments of Akatsuki. The North refers to Hokuto, who governs death. Therefore, the holder of the ring shoulders the responsibility of dominating the lives of others. This is consistent with Kakuzu's own characteristic of taking the lives of others through the secret technique of Earth Grudge and transferring them to himself. So after the meeting, Yohiko gave him this ring. The three guys who were the founders of Akatsuki are no different from this guy. Kakuzu glanced at the obedient Miyashiro-en beside him, and said lightly, they are all a group of people who have set their sights on Uchiha Chi and tried to use him to fulfill their own ambitions. However, 5 days ago, the actions of that little girl from Kirigakure changed the nature of this organization, so that I think that joining this organization will enable me to better complete the task you entrusted to me to protect Uchiha Chi. Hearing this, Uchiha Fugaku raised his eyebrows slightly. Then, he asked curiously, is the collection of information about the defenses of Yunming City's inner city also for this? Then, what do you want to do? Kakuzu raised his head slightly, glanced at the tall city within the city through the tea room, probably to offer a gift for the coming of God. Chapter 337 Fugaku's main Gekio, Jiraiya comes to visit urgently. A Genjutsu mansion nestled in the bustling capital. After sending off Kakuzu, who had brought Miyashiro and to be tortured. In the tea room, Uchiha Huagwang turned and looked at Uchiha Fugaku, asking in surprise, "Fugaku, following the last clan meeting, you should be in charge of the clan and overseeing the temporary severance of ties with the clan to prevent any malicious individuals within Konoha from causing trouble. Why, you suddenly came to me today?" Uchiha Fugaku was silent for a moment, then let out a long sigh. His presence here was due to an extreme warning from his right eye. This was the Mangekyo ability known as Kurain in Soul Life. After giving up his fight with Uchiha Chi for the position of clan leader nearly a month and a half ago, no longer burdened by daily anxiety about the clan's future, a situation that had once reached the point of insomnia, Fugaku had been enjoying everything he ate and slept until noon, waiting for Uchiha Chi to ascend to the helm and even hand him his position in the police department. He could be a stay-at-home husband, playing with Mikado and their soon-to-be-born son. It was pure bliss. Unfortunately, the good times didn't last. During the battle at Digakutani, news arrived that the young clan leader, Uchiha Chi, had fallen off a cliff and disappeared, most likely dead. That day, countless Uchiha clan members gathered at his door. The feeling of being surrounded and supported by so many made Fugaku Uchiha breathless. A heavy burden weighed heavily on his shoulders. Meanwhile, his clan's best lieutenant was ambushed and killed by an unexpected force during the hunt for the top brass of the gold exchange. With Mikado's due date approaching, it seemed as if the birth of the child named Itachi would be the beginning of something ominous. The constant barrage of bad news brought him to a breaking point. Panicked and bewildered, he awakened his ominous eyes at that moment. The Mangekyo Sharingan, the left eye's eye technique, Tsukuyomi, was a phantasmagorical technique born from his inner hesitation and the growing sense of time running out. The right eye's eye technique, Kurain Soul, was a passive, prescient power. Kurain Soul, also known as Otsu no Kami, was the mythical Yuga Soul God and Inari God, overseeing the harvest. Its unique ability, like a fox serving as Zinari's messenger, allowed it to discern the key to destruction amidst countless subtleties, preying on the rats that threatened the family's prosperity. This time, Uchiha Fugaku received a warning from his right eye, foreseeing the tragedy to come. Uchiha Kaguya, Uchiha Chiichiro, and the other Uchiha members who had prepared to aid Uchiha Chi in Yunming City would perish on that very day. And then, in a fleeting glimpse, like a vision, he saw Uchiha Chi, like him, having awakened his Mangekyo Sharingan, standing on a vast battlefield, slaughtering like a madman. The key to all this lies in the visitor who arrived at the Genjutsu mansion today, a guest named Miyashiro N. Upon learning that his daughter had been taken away by Uchiha Kaguya, Miyashiro N., enraged, will murder everyone in the mansion, immediately betray the Akatsuki organization, and seek revenge on Uchiha Chi. Uchiha Kaguya believed that with his and Chiichiro's two pairs of triple Magatama Sharingan, a host of Uchiha Chunin and Katnin, his own superior swordsmanship, and the support of Kokuzu, a cage-level warrior, he could subdue Oshiro N and force him into submission in cooperation with the Uchiha clan. However, he had no idea that Oshiro N possessed a forbidden eye on the same level as the Mangekyo Sharingan. Unleashing his fury, the three of them were no match for him, and paid the price with their lives. This was also the reason why Uchiha Fugaku traveled thousands of miles, braving the pressure of the third Hokage and his clan, to leave the village and come to the land of lightning. Chiichiro's words in the underground cave were true. Faced with the fate of his entire clan, he hesitated too much and missed out on something truly precious and important. Finally, recalling Uchiha Chi's words of Brother Fugaku before leaving the village, he secretly resolved that he would not allow such a tragedy to happen again. At this moment, under Uchiha Huagwang's questioning, Uchiha Fugaku felt a slight sense of daze. Had he truly changed everything? Would his reckless actions truly have any impact on the family? Did his actions actually help Uchiha Chi or harm him? Was missing the opportunity to open Uchiha Chi's Mangekyo Sharingan a good thing or a bad thing for the family? Furthermore, had he truly successfully prevented the future predicted by Dakujutsu, Kurato Soul Life? Would it never come true? Hey, Fugaku, even if you don't have to be the clan leader anymore, you will be the elder of the family in the future, don't slack off too much. Hey, Uchiha Huagwang pushed Fugaku and complained unhappily, what's that look in your eyes? Why do I look like a dead person in your eyes? Ahem. Uchiha Fugaku choked on his tea after being pushed like this and waved his hands quickly. Brother Huagwang, don't joke with yourself. Humph. Uchiha Huagwang rolled his eyes at Fugaku, his expression softened slightly, and he shook his head and said, however, Your coming this time is just in time. After all, Uchiha Chi is going to take revenge on the Land of Lightning tomorrow. There are still many elite people in the Hidden Cloud Village. With you here, Chi's safety can be guaranteed. Family members are still more reliable than outsiders. Then, as if he thought of something, his face suddenly sank, and he asked Fugaku with some embarrassment, "By the way, about that matter. Have you thought about how to tell Chi when he returns home?" Upon hearing this question, Uchiha Fugaku's face suddenly froze. At this moment, a burst of hurried footsteps suddenly came from outside the tea room. Soon, Chihiro's head popped out from the door. "Elder Huagwang, Lord Fugaku, there is a guest outside the barrier. I can't make a decision." "Look, guest." Uchiha Huagwang was slightly stunned. Has Kakuzu turned back again? The information about her mansion should only be told to Kakuzu. No, not Kakuzu. Chihiro's face twitched slightly. He scratched his head. He didn't understand what was going on, so he said bluntly, "It's the Sannin who came this time as part of the Fire Country Konoha delegation, Lord Jiraiya, and he looks very anxious." As soon as these words came out, Uchiha Huagwang and Uchiha Fugaku were stunned and looked at each other. "Jiraiya, why did he come to us, and how did he know the information here?" If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 338 The Prophecy of the Great Toad Immortal, the Son of Destiny. Upon learning of Jiraiya's sudden visit, Uchiha Huagwang frowned slightly. After a moment's thought, he turned and looked at Uchiha Fugaku. "Jiraiya actually came to Fugaku, and I haven't had time to ask you yet, what's the situation within the clan now?" Hearing this question, Uchiha Fugaku's face suddenly darkened. Within the clan, after the sudden attack on Kumagakure in Hell Valley, when we learned that Chi was still alive and would seek revenge on the Land of Lightning, almost the entire clan supported it. Several elders have even begun mobilizing for war. The leader of the Hawk faction, Uchiha Yoshiro, even bypassed me and asked the Hokage directly for the Uchiha clan to march on the Land of Lightning. The only elder who could suppress them, Uchiha Setsuna. Upon hearing this news, Uchiha Huagwang's eyes flickered. Is that so? This situation is not much different from when the Great Elder planned to assassinate the second Hokage and launch a coup. Konoha is also starting to get nervous. Jiraiya came here at this time, most likely to act as a lobbyist for Konoha and the daimyo of the Land of Fire, to ease the relationship between the village and the family. Thinking of this, Uchiha Huagwang let out a long sigh, raised his head and looked at Uchiha Chihiro's who was waiting at the door. "Chihiro, go and invite him in." Not long after, a tall, serious-looking man wearing a forehead protector with a ward oil, long white hair extending to his waist, and 2 red marks under his eyes was invited into the tea room. As soon as Jiraiya sat down, Uchiha Huagwang, who was sitting opposite him, frowned and asked, "Jiraiya, forgive me for being blunt, if you are representing the daimyo of the Land of Fire to persuade Uchiha Chi to stop?" Hearing this, Jiraiya was slightly stunned, shook his head immediately, and interrupted, "Wait, that kind of thing doesn't matter at all. You two don't have to be so nervous." Jiraiya waved his hand, as if he didn't care at all about what the two were worried about. Although Uchiha Chi acted a bit recklessly in the incident in the Land of Lightning this time, we are still in a period of war, and decapitation of the enemy's leader is also a strategy. In the final analysis, his behavior just did not get official endorsement and certification, and in this regard, as long as we find Orochimaru, the commander who is fighting outside, and get a mission permit from him, Uchiha Chi's guilt can be cleared. Jiraiya spoke sincerely, and stood on the side of the Uchiha clan, helping to make plans. This time, it would be difficult for Uchiha Fugaku and the others to deal with it. At this time, the entire Uchiha clan had already prepared for war, and because of Uchiha Chi, the relationship with the upper echelons of Konoha and the daimyo of the Land of Fire was at a freezing point. But how come to Jiraiya? This is not a big deal. Jiraiya saw that the two men were still looking at him with some doubt, so his face straightened and he said solemnly, "You two, I have come here now because there is something very important to me. I have received guidance from the Great Toad Sage of Myaboku Mountain. After I can stand on my own, I will travel around the world, start to accept disciples, and pass on all I have learned to them." And the Great Toad Sage predicted, "My disciple will bring changes to the world. I don't know whether this change will bring stability to the world or bring destruction. That child is the one I have been pursuing, the child of prophecy." Hearing this, Uchiha Fugaku frowned, feeling a little puzzled. "You came to find Uchiha Chi because of the sage's prophecy, and you mean, Uchiha Chi is the child of prophecy?" Thinking of this, Uchiha Fugaku shook his head. "But, Jiraiya, Chi is already Orochimaru's disciple." "That's right," Jiraiya nodded, and then spoke. "Uchiha Chi is definitely not the son of prophecy, and the son of prophecy that I favor is also someone else." Then, Uchiha Huagwang looked at Jiraiya, somewhat puzzled. "I was able to find the location of the Uchiha base in Yunming City thanks to the guidance of the Great Toad Sage. To be honest with you too, I originally came to the Land of Lightning as an envoy of Konoha, but just 5 days ago, I was reverse summoned to Meiboku Mountain again, and thus learned the latest prophecy of the Great Toad Sage." Jiraiya's face became serious, and he said solemnly, "A brand new path will be created for this world, more important than the son of prophecy, the son of destiny, like a true immortal in the legend, has appeared. He will hold the sword of the Thunder God in his hand, wear the jade of the Emperor, and come to this world as the most orthodox immortal, and the name of the child was extremely clear in the vague dream of the Great Toad Sage. His." Jiraiya took a deep breath and said solemnly, "Uchiha Chi." Hiss. Hearing Jiraiya's words, Uchiha Huagwang and Uchiha Fugaku both gasped, their pupils suddenly shrinking. Child of destiny? And paving a new path for the world, was he referring to Uchiha Chi? Wasn't that foolish boy a complete reckless scoundrel? These past few days, they'd been completely overwhelmed trying to cover up his mistakes. And when had our own Uchiha Chi become so powerful? They stared at each other in disbelief. However, as high-ranking Uchiha clan members, they knew a little about Jiraiya's deeds and his trajectory. They also knew some information about the 3 sacred sites for summoning beasts in the ninja world. The sages of those 3 sacred sites truly possessed extraordinary abilities, and Jiraiya was fortunate enough to be blessed by Mount Meiboku. His solemn words, coupled with his sudden discovery of the clan's secret base, lent his claims even more credibility. Could this be true? Uchiha Huagwang asked Fugaku, a bit bewildered. Of course this is true, Jiraiya glared suddenly. Moreover, now, my disciples and Uchiha Chi have come together. The legendary child of prophecy and the child of destiny accurately predicted by the Great Toad Sage have now gathered together. This is the moment of destiny. Jiraiya's face was solemn, and he said urgently, "The Great Toad Sage ordered me to quickly find and protect the child and bring him to Meiboku Mountain. This matter concerns the fate of the entire ninja world. Please, both of you, let Uchiha Chi come out to see me." Seeing Jiraiya's urgent expression, Uchiha Huagwang pondered for a moment and nodded secretly. But soon, facing Jiraiya's sincere face, he showed a little embarrassment. Since it is the request of the Great Toad Sage, it is not a problem to let Chi meet you, but, we don't know where Uchiha Chi is now. However, Uchiha Huagwang's face was determined. He looked at Jiraiya solemnly and said in a deep voice, "Tomorrow the 5 Kingdoms Conference will be held. The daimyo of the Land of Lightning will appear. He will definitely show up." Chapter 339 The Divine Artifact Yurasaki no Magatama. Elsewhere, a massive, island-like creature, floating in the ocean, followed its predetermined course, gradually approaching the coast of the Frost Country. The sea breeze blew past, carrying the cries of seagulls across the sky. Turtle Island, a place of training. Beneath the massive murals of the underground palace, within the open, pitch-black door, Uchiha Chi sat cross-legged at the edge of the altar, his hands resting on his knees, his eyes closed, his expression growing increasingly solemn. The next moment, the strange natural energy coursing through the secret room slowly swirled into the chest of the young man at the altar. Suddenly, a pair of deep purple, snake-like eyes opened, and lines of subtitles appeared before his eyes. Based on your understanding of Yin Dan and your 3-day observation of the flow of Yin attributed natural energy within the room, you have discovered the room's hidden inheritance and gained a glimpse of understanding. You've mastered Senjutsu, Yin Tsukuki, beginner. You've mastered Senjutsu, Yin Tsukuki, beginner. As your understanding of Yin Tsukuki deepens, you might be able to integrate it with other attributes, creating new bloodline limits or even eliminating bloodlines altogether. Huh? Uchiha Chi let out a long breath, his deep purple eyes gradually fading, revealing the crimson 3 Magatama Sharingan beneath. Because of the swift destruction, no complete legacy could be left behind. Ultimately, this tricky method was the only way to preserve the ancient Senjutsu, compared to Senjutsu of the attributes of lightning, fire, water, and earth. It's the wind that can be redirected and fixed by architectural structures that has ultimately transcended millennia and appeared before my eyes. So, that's why it's Senjutsu, Yinsukyuki. Uchiha Chi raised his hand, blood vessels bulging around his eyes, and formed a Chen seal with one hand. In the next instant, a visible purple wind blade appeared on his other palm. Yin Chun, creating form from nothing, and Wind Tun, slicing through everything. This Senjutsu, combining Yin Tun and Wind Tun, is characterized by its breathtakingly rapid generation speed and its immense cutting power. This Senjutsu is slightly lower in rank than the Yin Tun Raipa technique performed by Sixth Path Madara. As for extending it further, Yin Touch Lightning requires first mastering Purple Lightning, then combining it with Senjutsu, and Sixth Path Madara's Senjutsu, Storm Release Light Fang, powerful enough to sever the truth-seeking jade, first requires combining the lightning and water attributes, fusing it with the Bloodline Limit Storm Release, then combining Yin Touch Light Fang to elevate it to the point of eliminating the bloodline, and finally, combining it with Senjutsu. Only the Senjutsu Storm Release Light Fang achieved in this way can truly threaten an opponent at the level of 6 paths. After a moment's contemplation, Uchiha Chi casually swung the purple short blade. In other words, Senjutsu plus Yin Touch Lightning plus Bloodline Limit is the minimum requirement for battling a 6 paths level foe. The sages of the post-ancient period lacked such abilities, so they relied on simple, single-attribute techniques like wind cutting and lightning touch Light Fang to fight Kaguya. Thinking of this, Uchiha Chi glanced at the Magatama on the altar and shook his head. No wonder Kaguya easily suppressed them. Ancient carvings are carved on the altar where the Magatama is placed. They depict a group of immortals, weeping and clutching various magical arts, charging towards a figure bearing a crimson full moon with 9 Magatama on their backs. This relates to the ancient history described by Black Zetsu in the original novel. Ignoring Kaguya's rise to power and romantic history, we can see that after Kaguya swallowed the fruit of the sacred tree, the natives of the ninja world offered virtually no resistance, and she unified the 2 kingdoms, hoisting them all onto the sacred tree. However, after the unification, Kaguya's control over the kingdom declined, and she was frequently forced to quell rebellions. Uchiha Chi tentatively calls this period the post-ancient period. During this period, the grown-up Otsutsuki Haguramo, 6th-path sage, learned from a fraudulent drug dealer who had arrived in the land of the origin that a rebellion against Kaguya was underway in the other country. Kaguya, known as the Tyrant, had therefore traveled there to suppress the rebellion, leading to Gamamaru's abduction. This led Otsutsuki Haguramo to travel to the sacred tree, where he encountered his secret crush, Hori, who had died after offering sacrifices to the sacred tree. TV content: the people of the other country who had rebelled were the generation that had been suspended from the sacred tree by Kaguya's infinite Tsukuyomi, then had their memories erased and were released to reproduce. The reason they were able to contain Kaguya for so long was that the local ninja world had already undergone genetic modification by the sacred tree, possessing chakra. The animals, secretly seeking revenge against Kaguya Otsutsuki, combined the legacy of the sages from the era before the suspension with their later chakra to create Senjutsu chakra, which became the basis for the local humans' rebellion against Kaguya. Now it seems that the island turtle itself, the true waterfall, the headless stone statue, and the room that reaches the depths of the soul, this method of purely harnessing natural energy, must be the legacy of a true sage from ancient times. Uchiha Chi, however, believes the island turtle's buildings and the murals that later conceal the truth are relics from a later period. Back then, guided by animals, humans discovered a true waterfall and built this room, leaving behind a technique and an embarrassing history. Because only Kaguya could defeat her son. These sages were nothing more than bait and sacrifice to lure Otsutsuki Kaguya out and buy Otsutsuki Haguramo time to develop. This is the second part of Turtle Island's history. Uchiha Chi stood from the altar, sighed slightly, and looked at the altar before him. Before entering this hidden room, he had already explored the entire island, including the room next to this one where Naruto and Killer Bee cultivated their perfect Jinchuriki forms. The immortal technique, Yin Dun Huanzing, was the illusion attached to the gate, and for Uchiha Chi, possessing these eyes, it was easy to unlock. However, his expectation of finding a way to improve his sage form here was dashed. His sage form seemed to have reached a level comparable to that of the sages of Kame Island, and this place offered him no inspiration. As Orochimaru had said, the innermost chamber offered him little value beyond helping him control the power of aliens. However, Uchiha Chi did not return empty-handed. After analyzing the techniques inherited from the pitch-black room and absorbing the vast amount of yin-attributed natural energy within, the barrier surrounding the altar automatically dissipated, revealing the Magatama atop it. At this moment, as Uchiha Chi's palm touched the Magatama, a new subtitle suddenly appeared before his eyes. You have obtained, Divine Artifact, Yasakuni no Magatama, Main Body, the Divine Artifact, Yasakuni no Magatama, a precious object that has endured the fall of the Emperor, the revenge of tyrants, and the early days of the Shinobi clan. It passed through the hands of the Emperor of the Ancestral Kingdom, Hori, and the Six-Path Sage, fulfilling Mamoru's revenge plan and ultimately being buried here. The Six-Path Sage drained the artifact's power and integrated it into his bloodline, becoming the spiritual vessel for summoning Susanoo. Third stage, completed Susanoo. Possessing the artifact's original form allows the artifact to be summoned in advance and unleashed at its full power. I see. Uchiha Chi's expression froze as he read the subtitles. The Magatama pendant worn by the Emperor of the Ancestral Kingdom is the same red Magatama pendant worn by Hori, the woman the Six-Path Sage later harbored a crush on. It fell into the hands of the Six-Path Sage at the base of the sacred tree and became a powerful weapon in his fight against Kaguya Otsutsuki. The Six-Path Sage, in turn, integrated this power into his Susanoo, passing it down through his bloodline. This is precisely why every generation of Uchiha Gundam pilots can unleash the Yasakuni no Magatama in Susanoo's third stage. I was wondering where all those artifacts came from. It's ridiculous that everyone with a Susanoo possesses a Yasakuni no Magatama, so that's the root of it. Uchiha Chi, gripping the Magatama pendant, marveled, then hung it around his neck. But now it's mine. After discovering this hidden room and obtaining everything he could improve on Turtle Island, Uchiha Chi stood up, walked out the door, and stepped out of the underground palace. His frail state had completely changed, and his eyes shone brightly. At this moment, sunlight streamed down, shimmering on the sea. Seagulls fluttered their wings and flew high. The damp sea breeze lifted his long hair from his forehead. Gazing at the frost country coastline approaching at the end of his sight, Uchiha Chi curled his lips. Well then, Lightning Country, here I come. Chapter 340, Impeccable Defense? Pain breaks the city. The next day, early in the morning, in Yunming City, it was still dawn, but at this moment, the gates of the inner city had already been opened to receive the envoys from the 5 countries. The city walls were filled with heavily guarded warriors, almost forming another human wall on the city wall that was more than a mile long. 3 teams of Union elite soldiers were constantly patrolling the city walls, summarizing and reporting the situation at any time. After stepping onto the suspension bridge, crossing the moat, and passing through the nearly 20-meter-high city walls, Jiraiya, the Fire Nation's envoy to the talks, finally took in the sight within the steel fortress, the 10-hectare inner city. All useless buildings had been demolished, leaving only countless heavily armed fortresses, tents, chevaux de frise, battering rams, flying hooks, swallowtail torches, and saber-wielding carts. Standing on this plain, ninjas wearing Kumagakure headbands streamed like rivers, guarding the city's center. The 3-story castle tower, perched atop a 50-meter-high cylindrical cliff, was elevated by earth escape techniques. Rising from the ground to the left of the tower, towered a foreboding steel chakra cannon. This city within a city was no longer the prosperous capital it once was. It had been hollowed out and transformed into a vast military camp. Or perhaps, a vast battlefield built to trap Uchiha Chi. A battlefield built in the core of the capital. Hey, just to guard against one person, aren't you guys going a little too far? Following the receiving envoy, they passed through one exaggerated defense line after another and arrived at the bottom of the castle tower. Looking at the scenes along the way, Jiraiya was a little dumbfounded. He took 2 steps forward, trying to pry some information out of the Kumagakure who was leading the way. Exaggerated, however, a cold voice suddenly came from the side. A tall and strong young man named Ai, dressed in a Kumagakure ninja uniform, walked over from the other side of the rock wall below the castle tower, followed by the other members of the 5 countries participating in the talks. He glanced at Jiraiya coldly and answered the question in a deep voice, "No, this is not an exaggeration at all. As long as we can kill Uchiha Chi here, everything will be worth it." Jiraiya frowned slightly. Although he came as an envoy from the Fire Country, Now that he knew the prophecy of the Great Toad Sage, he had made up his mind to protect Uchiha Chi here until he could send him to Meiboku Mountain to meet the Great Toad Sage. But now, just from what he had seen, and the roughly estimated Kumagakure army, numbering no fewer than 4,000, Jiraiya was in a state of panic. If he attacked here, not to mention whether he could rescue Uchiha Chi, even if he summoned 2 sages in activated sage mode, it was still a question whether he could survive the Kumagakure army and the various barriers and traps he had encountered along the way. Moreover, Jiraiya simply couldn't understand why a single Uchiha Chi would warrant such a massive war from Kumagakure. His impression of Uchiha Chi was still stuck in the Rain Country. Back then, the brat's power had already surpassed his expectations, even capable of fighting Tsunagakure's Ebizo to the death. But even a cage wouldn't be enough to force Kumagakure to confront him with such a formation, right? At that moment, Jiraiya looked up and behind the young man Ai, at the crowd of ninja from various nations, wearing various forward protectors, gathered for the 5 nations talks. Besides him, there were 4 of them. The Tsunagakure faction seemed to have given up hope of killing Uchiha Churuji, having replaced Chiyo and Hagura with the young-looking Maki, a loyal subordinate of the 4th Kazekage, Raza, and Yura, another potential high-ranking figure in Tsunagakure. Meanwhile, the Iwagakure faction included the 4 Tails Jinchuriki, Lao Shi, who had previously served as an envoy, and the newly dispatched elite Junin, Higashibori, who had been dispatched by Iwagakure to replace the deceased Wang Tu. Looking back, no one from the Land of Water is coming this time, Jiraiya asked in surprise after joining the delegation and taking a look around. Yura of Tsunagakure shook his head. I heard that the 3rd Mizukage sent the leader of the Shinobi hunters, Zigwashin Pufferfish. I don't know why he didn't show up, and there was even no news about him in the end. He tightened the long scarf around his head and neck and chuckled. Maybe he's scared, after all, who would feel safe facing a guy like that? Upon hearing this, the young man Ai, who was leading everyone up the pillared steps to the castle tower, paused, turned around, and said with a firm face, everyone, there's no need to worry about your safety. This time, to ensure the smooth progress of the 5-nation talks, we have transferred all the elite troops in the village here, and have also sent many ninjas to support us at the invitation of the daimyos of the 5 major countries and nobles of various countries. Those who came here at the daimyo's invitation are the Iwagakure Kamizuru clan, Nekiyoshi, a ninja with a mystery release from the Kirigakure, Hinata Konoha and Hinata Shouta from the Konoha Hyuga clan, and the Fuma clan and Funin from the Forest Country, as well as the Zuinun clan who came here on a commission, and the assistance of many small countries, the Grass Country, the Taki Country, the Star Country, the Bear Country, the Rain Country, and the Iron Country. These many ninjas are forming perception units, intelligence units, special combat units, surprise attack units, the daimyo's guards, diversionary units, and elite trapping units. This is an encirclement formed by nearly 8,000 ninjas, forming an impenetrable defense that is absolutely impossible to break through. 3 lines of defense, impenetrable perception capabilities, and extreme firepower. No matter which direction they choose to attack, they will be detected instantly, and then the command center will dispatch troops to instantly extinguish their offensive ambitions. Standing on the steps of the huge cylindrical rock, the young man Ai suddenly waved his hand, pointing to the mighty army below, his face as cold as iron. Absolutely no one. They were able to break through such defenses. The delegation was about to follow Ai's direction to observe the Kumagakure army's formation when a sudden roar of surprise erupted from the group. Look, it was the Iwagakure's dawn siren. Pointing eastward, he demanded in horror, "What's that?" Everyone was startled at the sound and looked up. From their perspective, they could see a figure suddenly rising from the east and leaping into the sky. The figure wore a black robe adorned with red clouds and a 4-banded Rangakure forward protector. His red hair shone brilliantly in the rising sun. Then, the red-haired boy let out a hoarse and ferocious roar, angrily opened his eyes with ferocious lines, raised one hand, pointed at a section of the city wall below, and the legion of nearly 1,000 people behind the city wall. From now on, let the world feel pain. Shen, Luo, Tian, Zheng. The next moment, the entire land in the east was suddenly covered by a dazzling white light. Chapter 341. Then risk your life to realize your dream. This time, in order to ensure the smooth progress of the 5-nation talks, Kumagakure has established 7 armies and deployed 3 lines of defense within the inner city. They are divided into 3 rings. They are, the first ring, the long wall defense line, a white finger pointed at the periphery of the map, and a steady voice sounded. The ninja army is composed of forces invited by small countries and daimyo, as well as Kumogakure's intelligence forces. This part is the largest and most diverse. It includes samurai, wandering ninja, bounty ninja, guardian ninja of daimyo from various countries, and even core ninjas drawn from various villages who have a crucial impact on the war. They are responsible for guarding the city walls, intelligence exploration, and barrier perception. They are the easiest line of defense to break through, of course. Based on subsequent intelligence, Kumogakure probably doesn't intend to delay us here. The second ring is the defense line composed of the true elite of Kumogakure village. The red-haired young man raised his head, his eyes flashing slightly. He moved his finger, pointing to a large blank area on the map, and drew a large circle along the location of the castle tower marked in the center. The end line of war. Once you cross this line, you will face a battle that is no different from a real ninja war. This part is composed of the three largest units, the Special Combat Unit, the Surprise Attack Unit, and the Diversionary Combat Unit. The three units form a circular structure to guard the castle tower in the center of the city. The army has more than 2,000 elite troops, spread across the 10-hectare inner city defense line, which is loose on the outside and tight on the inside. Upon receiving the intelligence transmitted back from the first circle of long walls, they will immediately cross regions to concentrate and support the war zone. Having said that, Scorpion, who had never spoken so much in one breath, paused, frowned slightly, and pointed his finger at the center of the map. As for the third ring of defense, the defensive antenna, I only know that it is composed of the daimyo guards and elite siege troops. The specific personnel are unknown, but it is certain that it must be the most difficult line of defense to break through. Not far outside the inner city wall of Yunming City, behind a raised mound, Yohiko, Nagato, Konan, Madarumi, Mainjetsu Kazuki, Goashiro-en, Kokuzu, and Sasori gathered in front of a map depicting the overall floor plan of the inner city. Hearing Sasori's information, everyone's expressions froze. Is the information true? Yohiko frowned, looking up at Sasori solemnly. Of course, Sasori's expression didn't change much, as he calmly stated the source of the information. Yura from the Sunagakure delegation is a chess piece I controlled with my subconscious sans manipulation. He has been staying inside the Kumogakure camp since 6 days ago. The information he passed on won't be too far off. Yohiko frowned, and after a moment's hesitation, he spoke heavily. According to the information Konan, Nagato, and I have obtained from tracking Uchiha Chi all the way, after Uchiha Chi issued the assassination declaration, Kumogakure moved the large force stationed in the Frost Country back to the Lightning Country and rushed to Kumogakure City. If Master Sasori's information is correct, then, what we are about to face. It's the elite Kumogakure army of 8,000 men, and reinforcements from across the ninja world, ordered by the daimyo of each nation, in total, a shinobi force exceeding 10,000. Everyone's expressions darkened upon hearing this news. After the Uchiha clan had declared their solitude and departed for the sea, the 8% had each chosen a mission and set out on their own. Yohiko, Nagato, and Konan, using their summoning beasts' chameleon-like abilities to conceal themselves, chose to gather the most dangerous intelligence from the outside world about Kumogakure. Kokuzu and Miyashiro-en chose to investigate routes into the inner city. The map now being gazed upon was Kokuzu's possession from the Uchiha clan. Madarumi and Mainjetsu Azuki, leveraging their respective families' connections and influence, gathered intelligence from the daimyo, determining the number and strength of the reinforcements being sent from the Land of Lightning. And Scorpion, the seemingly solitary, red-haired youth, stood out from the crowd. He seemed completely indifferent to his presence, even his actions in aid of Uchiha Chi seemed baffling. They couldn't see through him, couldn't know what he was seeking, and had no right to force him to do anything. The original plan was simply to ask him to stay temporarily, not reveal their intelligence, and to leave at his own discretion after the incident. Unexpectedly, Scorpion, without saying a word, had thoroughly uncovered the locations and numbers of 5 of the 7 inner-city garrisons, a surprising discovery for the entire Akatsuki organization. Of course, now it seemed, it might as well have been a shock. At that moment, Scorpion looked around at the crowd and couldn't help but sneer. As an outsider, he saw the demands and wishes of everyone present most clearly. So, facing an army of 10,000, you lost souls seeking answers from a 12-year-old. Now, are you finally going to face reality? Scorpion stared at Yohiko, at everyone present, with amusement, trying to find a hint of laughter on their faces to alleviate his own growing irritation and his desperate desire to see someone. Only when the time came did he share the nearly despairing information with Akatsuki. This wasn't about good or evil, it was simply a bit of his own bad taste. Because Scorpion hated waiting. However, no, Yohiko appeared completely undeterred, speaking sincerely. Thank you very much for the intelligence, Mr. Sasori. And thank you all for your hard work today. He raised his head seriously, scanning the crowd. Sasori frowned in displeasure at his words. Nagato and Konan, with determined, confident eyes, gave him support. Maingetsu Kazuki, with a hint of anticipation on his lips. Kokuzu, whose expression remained unchanged. And then there was Mishiro En, who was embarrassed by the sincere thanks he received despite having done nothing and nearly receiving a beating. Finally, he cast his gaze on Terumi Mei, whose face grew increasingly heavy as she remained silent. Then, let me confirm one last thing, Terumi Mei, you're not lying to us. According to the plan, whether Uchiha Chi comes or not, this is the battle that will launch our dreams, of course. Hearing this, Terumi Mei took a deep breath, a glint of determination flashing in her clear, emerald eyes. I'm not begging for Uchiha Chi's power, but we are truly moving forward for our respective dreams, whether it's you, me, or everyone present here. Behead the daimyo, assassinate the Mizukage, seize a country, and accumulate our own power. Finally, let the whole world bathe in the sunshine of Akatsuki. Yohiko exhaled deeply, and looked at Konan and Nagato, exchanging glances. Then, he turned around, stepped on the earth and stones to climb to the top of the hill, and looked at the tall city wall in front of him, which was 20 meters high and made entirely of black stone. His sight seemed to pass through each brick and fell on the army of more than 1,000 behind it. Yohiko's eyes suddenly condensed, and he grinned. He clapped his fists and laughed. Then bet your lives to realize your dreams. Akatsuki Organization, Operation begins. Chapter 342 Zai Ocean Group, join us. Our goal is quite clear, it's the castle tower in the center of the three-ring defense line. The cage and the daimyo will definitely appear at the Five Kingdoms Summit, so, the plan is simple. Yohiko stared at the tall black stone wall in front of him and said solemnly, we will then split into two groups, the decoy group and the breakthrough group, gather at one point, like a sharp knife, and pierce the enemy's defense line deeply, use the fastest speed to break through the defense line, behead the daimyo, penetrate the enemy formation in a straight line, and evacuate the scene. The decoy group will rotate positions to cut off the enemy's forces and prevent the team from being surrounded and caught in a fierce battle, and the breakthrough group must be in the most powerful posture, sweep away all obstacles in front of them. Hearing this, everyone nodded. Even Kikuzu, the oldest and most experienced member of the team, agreed. A wise choice, faced with an army of tens of thousands of people piled into the narrow battlefield of the inner city. A scattered breakout would only result in the battlefield being divided by the human wave tactics and defeated one by one. Akatsuki's advantage over the enemy at this point was that all its members possessed strength above that of an elite jonin. Only by clenching their fists could they, while piercing through the enemy lines, preserve their strength to deal with the unknown enemy at the final third line of defense and ultimately decapitate the daimyo. Then, let's confirm this again. Yohiko tilted his head slightly, his eyes determined. The decoy team consists of me, Konan, Maingetsu Hazuki, and Goeji-en, and the breakthrough team consists of Nagato, Kakuzu-sen, and Madarumi. Finally, Master Scorpion will be responsible for covering the rear guard and disposing of the giant chakra cannon that prevented Orochimaru's plan to collapse Kumagakure in Kumagakure. That's all. Wait, at this moment, Goeji-en, a member of the team, frowned slightly and lowered his square sunglasses, revealing a pair of blood-red dragon eyes with square pupils and crimson whites. The first obstacle before us isn't just a wall that can be easily climbed. He raised his left hand and waved it forward, and chakra so light that it was almost weightless passed in front of the team, like wind blowing on the surface of a pond, stirring up invisible ripples in front of him out of thin air. Miyashiro then said solemnly, but, this site is a spherical barrier created by the Kumagakure barrier squad, which covers the entire inner city. Intruders will be sensed immediately, and people will be dispatched to this direction immediately, if this can be avoided. However, at this moment, swish. From the west side of the inner city a few kilometers away, dense rune spells that were winding like tadpoles suddenly spread out, instantly passing in front of everyone and rushing to the end of the site on the other side. Then, This huge barrier covering the entire city suddenly appeared, and then, in a brief moment, almost in the blink of an eye, the surface of the barrier was completely dyed red, crawling with tadpole-shaped runes. Then, bang! After a slight shake, the perception barrier blocking everyone in front of it actually exploded like glass. In the west, someone actually took action before us. Madarumi was suddenly startled and looked to the north in surprise. Who could it be? Whoever it is, they have helped us a lot. This is an opportunity. Yohiko quickly looked behind him, frowned and called out, Nagato. Yes. Nagato nodded solemnly. He took a few steps forward, walked to Yohiko and grabbed his shoulders, while Yohiko immediately squatted down and lifted up Nagato's legs and feet. Let's start. Yohiko took a deep breath and mobilized the chakra in his body. Under the black robe with red clouds, the muscles in his sturdy body were tense and the veins bulged. Unlike Nagato, who was proficient in 6 types of chakra attributes with amazing destructive power and had the Eye of the Sage, and unlike Konoha, who created the paper escape technique, Yohiko considered himself dull and only specialized in water escape technique and great sword technique. He practiced all the way to a level that amazed Jiraiya. This is actually a strong body that can fight with a furious Naruto, who has transformed into a half-tailed beast and exploded into the form of 6 tails. At this moment, holding Nagato, Yohiko frowned with a throbbing forehead and shouted in a deep voice, "Ha!" He treated his best friend as a javelin, holding the sole of his foot with one hand and suddenly pushed upwards. Bang! The surroundings were instantly pushed and pulled, making a sharp roar that had reached the speed of sound. Nagato suddenly flew into the sky. Like a bird, he flew over the city wall, jumped over the barrier, and stepped over the heads of countless wall-guarding warriors who looked up in surprise. Facing the gazes that were suddenly cast from all directions of the inner city, Nagato stretched out one hand downwards, and the strong wind lifted the red hair roots that he usually covered in front of his forehead, and raised them high, revealing the ferocious reincarnation eyes that were circled inside each other, with the center of the pupil shrunk to a black dot. At this moment, ha! He roared, and pointed his fingers and palms towards the center. Shinra Tensei, the invisible hand of God will fling all living beings away. It will descend in an instant. With Nagato as the center, the circular gravitational wave will spread to a range of nearly 100 meters in an instant and explode in midair. In an instant, the 20-meter-high city wall collapsed instantly as if crushed by a solid iron ball. The warriors and ninjas from small countries who were guarding the wall were pushed away by the invisible violence before they could react, and the unlucky guys who were right below were instantly merged with the city wall and were crushed and collapsed in an instant. It was not until Nagato jumped forward with his counter-thrust that the Kumagakure ninjas 100 meters away reacted and sounded the alarm like crazy. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! Command Center, the east is under enemy attack, requesting support. Before the smoke of gunpowder had dispersed, from the edge of the city wall to the command center, and then through flag signals to the East Command Branch, the decision was passed down to the actual personnel. In just a short moment, a mixed ninja army of more than 1,000 people, led by their leader, the Cloud Ninja, had already pressed forward. However, at this moment, the smoke of gunpowder dispersed, and behind Nagato, 7 figures of different heights had appeared. The only thing in common was that these 7 people were all wearing the same black Hokage Zio robe. The strong wind blew the corners of the 8 people's clothes. Among them, 2 figures stepped forward, and in the process, their hands were already quickly forming hand seals. In the lead, there was a tall figure with dark green eyes, wearing a mask, and 2 black shadows squatting on his shoulders. Combining the Earth Grudge, Fire-style masked monster and the Earth Grudge, Wind-style masked monster, both used fire-style, head hardship and wind-style, suppression at the same time to create a very large range of ninjutsu attacks. Compound ninjutsu, flame wind dance, strange face explosion, the ninjutsu was instantly formed. Kakuzu took a deep breath, clasped his hands together, and formed the final C-seal. Boom. The ninjas who had rushed to the wall had just come face to face with the attackers when they saw a raging wind surged across nearly 1,000 meters. Like a tsunami, a sea of fire instantly swept across them, bearing down on them head-on. Chapter 343, Great. Give Uchiha a shot. That jutsu belongs to Takenin's S-rank renegade ninja, Kakuzu. He's joined Akatsuki too, standing in the center of the battlefield, atop a cylindrical cliff. Jiraiya and the rest of the delegation stared at the instantly collapsed section of the city wall to the east, and the huge sea of fire that followed, instantly engulfing the oncoming army. Jiraiya frowned slightly, thinking to himself, the Akatsuki where Uchiha Chi has already taken action, while the Kumagakure side's reaction is obviously a beat slower. He tilted his head slightly, his peripheral vision glancing to the west, but all he saw was a rock wall blocking his view. I can't see it from here, however, according to the plan, Minato should have already taken action. However, with such a large-scale barrier, even with Minato's attainments in sealing techniques, it would be impossible to lift it so quickly. Did something unexpected happen in the meantime? Jiraiya reached into the ninja tool bag hanging on his waist, grasped a peculiarly shaped kunai, and took a deep breath. In order to fulfill the prophecy of the Great Toad Sage and protect Uchiha Chi, 5 days ago, Jiraiya, disregarding Sarutobi Hiruzen's prohibition, secretly released Minato Namikaze, who had been in prison with Uzumaki Kushina under the guise of reporting but was in fact under house arrest, before departing for the Land of Lightning. He then rushed to Kumo City with his disciples. His goal was to dismantle the most crucial link in Kumagakure's defenses, the vast sensory barrier that enveloped the entire inner city, impervious to physical attack. This barrier effectively enabled Kumagakure to exploit a map, constantly monitoring the enemy's position and dispatching overwhelming numbers of counter-ninjas. Even a Kage would have had little chance of survival in such an environment. The stark difference between a ninja army equipped with intelligence and one without was utterly different. The former could prepare a variety of combined ninjutsu, unleashing counter-ninjutsu that rivaled, or even surpassed, the power of a Kage, capable of even battling the Ten Tails. The latter, however, stood no chance against the Akatsuki, a force of supreme ninja warriors. In a world where individual strength reaches sky-high levels, the advantage of numbers requires the combined power of vision, intelligence, and other abilities. Jiraiya had brought Minato with him precisely for this very reason. No matter how grandiose Ai's boasts, he would be stunned when Jiraiya struck him directly at the core. Over the past 5 days, Jiraiya had thoroughly mastered the sensory barrier within Yunming City, relying on his masterful infiltration techniques. Now, blinding the Kumagakure army, the first 2 rings of defense collapsed before the advancing Akatsuki. So, what should you do, son of the Raikage? Jiraiya forced a smile and looked at the young AI quietly. It's time to reveal the exact personnel of the 3rd ring of defense, right? Otherwise, we can't feel at ease. Just as Jiraiya thought, seeing the first line of defense in the east was broken in an instant, Maki, who was thrown to the Sands village by Raza to take the blame, his sallow face turned pale in an instant, and he immediately began to question the young AI without saying a word. Son of the Raikage. Is this what you call a flawless defense? You can't even guarantee the safety of the delegation. I think you are simply, however. Before Maki could put pressure on the Cloud Village side, the young AI turned his head coldly, glanced at Maki, and said lightly, Cloud Village is not as fragile as you think. Watch carefully. The moment the words fell, the situation on the field changed again. The Kumagakure forces, initially overwhelmed by the combined ninjutsu flame wind rage and strange face explosion, had only time to deploy a few scattered water-style ninjutsu to resist, but were completely outmatched and instantly crushed. However, contrary to everyone's expectations, the moment this gap was opened, the Kumagakure forces, as if anticipating this situation, quickly filled the gap with 2 new ninja units from the left and right wings. Unlike the previous units, these 2 units were clearly well prepared. Combined ninjutsu, water shock wave, the units, which included a significant number of water-style ninjutsu combined their techniques to amplify the power. This simple water-style ninjutsu, combined with hundreds of ninja, possessed a force no less powerful than the Great Explosion water shock wave. The collision with Kokuzu's combined ninjutsu instantly stirred up a vast expanse of white mist. Jiraiya's brow furrowed, his gaze fixed on the 2 incoming units' flanks, where something like a black cloud drifted in the air. It seemed as if these 2 clouds partially integrated the Kumagakure forces in the corresponding locations, serving as a means of rapidly transmitting intelligence and orders. Those are bees, yes, young AI said calmly. They are from the Iwagakure clan, the Kamasuryan clan. They specialize in controlling bees, a power shared by your Konoha Aburain clan. When Uchiha Tsutomu declared his intention to assassinate the daimyo, he was effectively antagonizing the entire ninja world, and such a move, is sheer folly. There's nothing much to see here, please hurry and head to the 5 Nations talks. Hearing this, And watching the situation rapidly deteriorate and the battlefield descend into a stalemate, Jiraiya's heart tightened. Kumagakure, a ninja village built on brotherhood and boasting the fewest bloodline limits and secret techniques in the entire ninja world, had, under the daimyo's influence, acquired the secret techniques of other villages. If Akatsuki's momentum were hindered, preventing them from reaching the castle tower, they would face only defeat. To ensure Uchiha's survival, his only option was to risk his own life, using the envoys as a platform to reach the crucial location where Uchiha was bound to arrive. Then, he could deliver Minato's kunai to him. And now, would Uchiha be there? What was his own decision? Jiraiya couldn't help but wonder. However, at this moment, a burst of urgent footsteps suddenly came from the bottom of the simple circular staircase built against the cliff. Master AI, a group of members of the Kumagakure barrier squad, wearing Kumagakure forward protectors and white robes and uniforms, ran up breathlessly, shouting nervously, "We have important information, Uchiha." He showed up. Upon hearing this news, the young man AI's face suddenly changed, revealing a hint of excitement. "What did you say?" The members of the barrier squad immediately waved their hands and pointed in the direction where Jiraiya came from. "He's to the north, at the city gate." The young man AI immediately revealed a sneer and waved his hand. "Well, you're here. How dare you walk through the main gate so openly? How much does this kid look down on us?" "Listen." The young man AI glared at the barrier squad ninja with a dark face and shouted angrily, "Send a message to B immediately, use the chakra cannon, and shoot him for me." Chapter 344, Immortal Technique, Escape and Transform. Hypnotize 10,000 people. Just as the Kumagakure faction suddenly discovered Uchiha's presence and the young man, AI, decisively ordered the artillery fire. On the other side, on the west side of the inner city, was the location of the barrier squad, deployed by Kumagakure to set up a perception barrier. At that moment, sitting cross-legged before a giant water ball-like object, the current leader of the Kumagakure barrier squad, dressed in a white uniform and with white hair and beard, suddenly opened his eyes. Strange, is this an illusion? What's going on? The next moment, his vision blurred, and he saw a strangely shaped kunai pressed against his neck. A young man with golden hair and a stern expression appeared silently before him. He swallowed unconsciously. "Who are you?" Yellow Flash, the barrier squad leader cautiously raised his head, and upon seeing the newcomer's appearance, his eyelids twitched, and his scalp tingled. Since the outbreak of the Third Shinobi World War, an unspoken rule has been circulating among the major hidden villages. If you encounter Konoha's Yellow Flash while on a mission, you can abort the mission without failing. Logically, since he had seen the Yellow Flash here, the barrier squad leader had a legitimate reason to abandon his mission. However, his current position depended on the safety of nearly 10,000 people, all of whom were his colleagues and juniors. With this thought in mind, the barrier squad leader gritted his teeth and reached out to touch the water ball in front of him, ready to use his last ounce of strength to spread the news that the Yellow Flash had appeared in his area. However, at that moment, a hand covered in a blue arm guard reached out faster than his own and grasped his hand. "Please step aside quietly." Namikaze Minato's gaze fell on the hand that was stretched out to the water ball, and then he spoke calmly, "I am not here as a Konoha ninja, and I don't want to provoke a war, and my request is only to remove the perception barrier of this city. Afterwards, I will seal your memory, and you will not be blamed for it." "Remove the barrier." The leader of the barrier squad was stunned when he heard this, then shook his head and said with gritted teeth, "Even if you remove this barrier, it will be useless. Besides, the time it takes to remove a barrier of this level is far beyond your imagination. This is a giant barrier technique modified from the regeneration barrier passed down from the Uzumaki clan. Namikaze Minato, the patrol squad will come to check on me every 5 minutes. If you are discovered here, it will be a serious crime of provoking a war between the two countries. You have to think it over carefully. That's a problem to be considered later." Namikaze Minato shook his head, held the other's hands, tied them behind his back, sealed them and threw them aside. Then, he raised his head and gazed at the giant ball of water, bubbling with bubbles, before him. In a trance, he seemed to see through it the scene 6 days prior, when Uchiha had suddenly turned hostile and knocked him unconscious. Minato took a deep breath, clenched his hands, trembling as if ready to strike, and his expression hardened. As a former comrade, Minato knew full well that Uchiha possessed immense strength. Since he had broken through the Raikage's hold and defeated Killer Bee in the Battle of Jigakudani. It was highly likely that he would succeed in decapitating the daimyo of the Land of Lightning under the Hokage's protection in this assassination attempt. But what would happen after the assassination? Facing a massive Kumagakure army of 10,000, a foreign environment filled with traps, and the simultaneous presence of the OB team and the third Hokage, rather than the round-the-clock battles of Jigakurani, Uchiha Chi, with his strength in Jigakurani, would likely have been slain here. Not to mention now that he had lost his tailed beast, his ability to sustain a sustained fight was severely limited. This was precisely why Minato had appeared here. We must dismantle this barrier before that guy breaks into the inner city. Otherwise, he might not see Jiraiya-sensei, and then I won't be able to take him away with the Flying Thunder God Jutsu. I don't have much time left, only 3 minutes. I have to give it my all. With this thought, Minato raised his palm, formed a hand seal, and pressed it against the water ball. Uchiha Chi, this time, he raised his face, his eyes becoming incredibly determined. I won't be careless again, even if I have to break your limbs. I will bring you back to Konoha. Meanwhile, on the other side, on the north side of Yunming City, toward the city gate. After completing his training on the 5th day, he arrived in the Frost Country on the island Turtle, then returned to the Lightning Country along the same route he had taken before. Uchiha Chi returned here again. Unlike the last time, when they smashed directly into the inner city, connecting the entire mountain with no resistance, after 6 days of fermentation, the Kumagakure side had rebuilt the city. Through his Sharingan, he could clearly see the vast barrier stretching across the city, enveloping the entire city, the retracted drawbridge, and the murky moat. Is this a regeneration barrier? Uchiha Chi observed the veins of chakra flowing within the barrier with a strange expression, then suddenly laughed. He had just used this technique on Malloy, the future leader of the Kumagakure barrier squad, when he first left the village. Super Death Battle Barrier. This was a sealing technique derived from the Uzumaki clan's regeneration barrier technique, and Kumagakure was actually using this technique as the city's first barrier? Thinking of this, Uchiha Chi couldn't help but laugh. But this wasn't a coincidence. After all, the enemies he had trapped with a super death battle barrier were almost always dead, and those who survived were mostly allies. Raza, the only one who had witnessed this move, could only discern it as a sealing technique from a distance, unable to determine the specific technique. After that, Uchiha Chi rarely used it, as it proved ineffective against attacks from even a Hokage. Kumagakure, as everyone knows, was a very poor village. Aside from their unique ninjutsu and lightning techniques, their ninjutsu reserves were largely plundered. During the demise of the Whirlpool Country, Kumagakure had only acquired a few sealing techniques. The regeneration barrier was already considered the highest level of these. After all, their Jinchuriki still used the old-school iron armor seal. A series of coincidences led to the current information gap. Kumagakure used the highest level regeneration barrier to target Uchiha Chi, but they were unaware that he already possessed this technique. Then, using it as a greeting would be quite appropriate. Uchiha Chi smiled faintly as he gazed at the vast barrier before him, then raised his hand and placed it on it. From his heart, strange symbols gradually spread out, flowing down his arms and instantly landing on the barrier. Immediately, using the same method used to regenerate the barrier, he poured a massive amount of natural energy into it. Suddenly, Uchiha Chi was startled. Following the spreading natural energy, he sensed what was happening on the other side through the fluctuations of the barrier. Huh? The barrier is being lifted. Is that chakra from Minato? He's sensing me too. Uchiha Chi's eyes suddenly lit up. What he was doing was essentially the same as Minato's. Both were releasing their own chakra to locate and seize control of the barrier's core. The difference was that he was using a massive amount of natural energy, in a completely wasteful manner, to spread throughout the barrier's veins, searching for its core in the process. Namake's Minato, on the other hand, was already at the core, his chakra racing along the sealing veins to reach every corner. He lacked control over the core, while Namake's Minato lacked time. The two hit it off immediately, and the moment Minato sensed his chakra, he immediately switched to another method of operation. He wanted to help Uchiha Chi master the entire barrier. In that case, Uchiha Chi's eyes suddenly lit up again. Perhaps, we can use this barrier covering the entire city to perform this technique, Senjutsu, Yinten Illusion, use illusion to hypnotize 10,000 people. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 345, The barrier is peeled off and Susanoo is bombarded. The faint light of dawn illuminated the sky. As the half-penetrated sun shone through, the clouds stained a crimson. As the envoys from the 5 nations entered the city gates, the atmosphere atop the walls suddenly shifted. No one spoke, even their breathing quickened with anxiety. Everyone present knew the nature of the impending arrival. The only difference was the direction from which the lunatic issuing the assassination declaration would arrive. Ninjas and samurai, the assembled crowd, held their breath, nervously peering at every corner beneath the walls, their gazes anxiously scanning the pre-cleared, deserted streets. Until, at the gates, footsteps, unabashedly present, echoed. Tap, tap, tap. Ninja boots crushed the dust, steadily advancing along the bluestone pavement. Captain. That direction. Hearing the noise from the city walls, the city's lieutenant, Matoi, whipped his head around, pointing in the direction of the city gate. He called out to his captain, "There's a massive chakra surge coming our way." Matoi's face tensed. Even the way seal he formed with his hand trembled, nearly losing its grip. That was a chakra surge comparable to that of a tailed beast Jinchuuriki. Meanwhile, the mature and measured captain of the city defense, Rami, glanced down, his gaze fixed on the corner at the end of the street. He took a deep breath and, whoa, he spotted the figure approaching the corner. Suddenly, he stopped 50 meters from the city gate, his steps pausing as if he had discovered something new. The figure wore a black short-sleeved shirt with a stand-up collar and a gray lining. A purple hanami, likely a type of rope worn by Orochimaru, tied around his waist, loose-fitting trousers, leggings, and black ninja boots. And that face left a lasting impression on Rami. "That's right, it's Uchiha Chi," Rami gasped, his gaze fixed on the spot where the figure stood, his nerves instantly rising. Matoi, beside him, kept relaying the intelligence he'd seen. "He's discovered the regeneration barrier, he didn't trigger the barrier's alarm." "Wait, what is he doing?" Matoi, startled, stared at Uchiha Chi, who raised his hand before the barrier, bewildered. If Uchiha Chi took another step forward, the barrier squad would sense his position and quickly mobilize their forces to defend against him. But now, Uchiha Chi was stuck in front of the barrier, unable to move forward. It was unclear what he was going to do. "Whatever you do, Matoi, report Uchiha Chi's presence here to the higher-ups immediately. Quick!" Rami snapped into action, his voice gravely commanding, "Summon a shaman." Matoi immediately obeyed, summoning his contracted owl to relay the information to the castle tower in the heart of the inner city. At that moment, standing before the barrier, Uchiha Chi naturally witnessed this action, but he didn't stop it. He simply slowly twisted his palm, pressing against a barrier surface. Soon, in less than a minute, a dense stream of runes, like tadpoles, began to spread from the barrier's heart. In the blink of an eye, the barrier covering the entire inner city was dyed the red of the Uchiha flame formation. And then, bang, with a sound like shattering glass, before everyone's eyes, the barrier enveloping the entire city suddenly took on its semicircular shape. After a moment of shaking, it shattered with a bang. Through the silent coordination between Namikaze Minato and Uchiha Chi, they instantly seized control of the barrier's core, instantly dismantling the first layer of Kumagakure's defenses. The barrier was broken. At that moment, Uchiha Chi suddenly raised his head, his crimson eyes fixed on the Kumagakure ninjas, who stood poised atop the city walls. "Kumagakure, are you prepared for my arrival?" Wow! The sudden appearance of the barrier's lifting caused an uproar among the ninjas atop the walls. They instinctively avoided Uchiha Chi's cold gaze, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. But soon, the older and more experienced Rami acted decisively, his eyes widening as he roared, "Calm down, according to the plan, release my ninjutsu." In the next instant, the two opposing forces acted simultaneously. Uchiha Chi took a step, lunging forward and charging. His gaze locked directly on Rami, the Kumagakure ninja atop the city walls, seemingly the leader. There was no need for a plan, he simply needed to blast through the defenses, breach the walls, and charge inward, all the way to the castle tower in the heart of the inner city. After all, this time, Uchiha Chi hadn't considered resorting to other circumventions. Assassination, all it took was to advance, and advance. With absolute strength, crush all resistance. Sweep away all disobedience. Eliminate all obstacles. As long as no one in the entire city dared to raise a single voice in his presence, victory would be the Uchihas. And just then, a sudden chorus of roars erupted from above the city walls. Lightning release, thunder illusion lightning pillar, X50. Faster than sound, light. This jutsu transforms the entire body into a flash of lightning, misleading the opponent into mistaking it for a vision obstructing jutsu, thus naturally falling prey to the illusion. Using the cover of intense light, the enemy enters the illusion unnoticed. Even Sasuke's Eagle Squad fell prey to this jutsu. And right now, the Kumagakure didn't need the illusion's properties, they simply needed the intense light. 50 beams of light, comparable to ship searchlights, illuminated simultaneously. Everything around them was instantly engulfed in white light, transforming it into a pale expanse. In such an environment, both sides would lose their vision, while the side that had been prepared would be able to accomplish more in such an environment. At this moment, far above the cliffs where the castle tower sat in the center of the city, the young man's face turned grim. He roared at the two men standing on the side of the mountain, where the huge steel cannon was located. Give me fire. Standing on the edge of the cannon, the Hyuga ninja with white eyes frowned, seemingly very unhappy with the young man's extremely disrespectful attitude. However, due to his duty, he still stared straight ahead with his eyes wide open, and without turning his head, he said, "Reset the reference to 0, live ammunition correction, north side, 11 o'clock direction, calibrate 3 units to the left." Upon hearing this, Killer B immediately did as he was told, and then injected a huge amount of tailed beast chakra into the barrel. The next moment, boom, flames erupted from the muzzle, propelling the solid shell from the barrel. Suddenly, a fierce wind pierced the hollowed-out projectile. In an instant, something like a meteorite, trailing a crimson tail of flame, shot towards the city gates, passing over the city walls. At this moment, the two opposing forces at the city gates were blinded by multiple levels of the lightning release, thunder pillars. Under the intense light, even the Sharingan struggled to grasp the scene before them. However, the Cloud Village had taken this move for granted. They had overlooked Uchiha's mind's eye. Through the interweaving of his 5 senses, a seamless mental image was created, and Uchiha immediately saw the object that was shooting towards him. Tisk, is this the same chakra cannon that shattered Orochimaru's Yamada no Orochi jutsu? Uchiha couldn't help but raise an eyebrow at the swiftly hurtling projectile. When Orochimaru met him again after the collapse of Kumagakure's plan, he had been noticeably more modest, not immediately claiming to have mastered countless techniques. It was unclear whether it was because of the White Snake Sage's knowledge or because he had been struck by this thing. In this situation, Uchiha could actually dodge this triple-speed projectile by simply activating Sage Form. However, Sage Form needed to be reserved for dealing with the third Raikage. Furthermore, Uchiha's exploration revealed that this state couldn't be used endlessly within a short period of time as described. The heavenly initiation, brought about by Sage Transformation, negated the side effects of Sage Form, allowing him to activate it indefinitely as long as he had sufficient natural energy. But the Sage Heart he had crafted couldn't keep up with the infinite energy consumption of activating the positive infinity. The immense amount of natural energy stored in a Sage Heart was only enough to maintain the Sage stance for 5 minutes. Once this state lasted more than a minute, the subsequent consumption would increase exponentially. Furthermore, adding the natural energy drawn from the surrounding area within a 10,000-meter radius, refreshing the state only increased the ability to use it once. Of course, with continued use of the Sage stance, the natural energy would continuously amplify cellular activity, and Uchiha's physical strength would continue to rise. As the duration increased, the rate of physical strengthening would also increase. It was estimated that it would only take 3 years to achieve this state, with normal state equaling the initial activation. Currently, at most, Uchiha only had 10 minutes of Sage stance time left. Using it here was a waste. Then, let's use this. Uchiha's lips curled slightly, excitedly gazing at the projectiles hurtling towards him. The pitch-black Magatama within his scarlet eyes twirled slightly, and the next moment, 26 bones, a hue between bright yellow and crimson, rose from the ground behind Uchiha. A half-skeletal Susanoo quickly took shape amidst a pale flash of lightning. Raising its arm, a bony palm of Susanoo instantly rose, fingers spread, and it grasped the cannonball with its bare hands. Chapter 346, Triple Doors. Strangeness. At this moment, Standing alone on the mountain peak beside the giant pillar that supported the castle tower, HMPH, can this thing really break through Susanu's defenses? With his eyes wide open, Hyuga Shoda cast a sidelong glance at the smoking chakra cannon beside him. A hint of arrogance crossed his face, as if he looked down upon Kumaga-Cure's weapon. Such a despicable trick, only Kumaga-Cure would resort to ninja, this scrap metal is completely useless. Nearby, Killer Bee pushed up his sunglasses and glanced curiously at the Hyuga clan reinforcements sent by the Fire Nation daimyo, but he still explained good-naturedly. In response to the skeletal giant defenses displayed by Uchiha Chi during the last battle of the Cloud Collapse, we specifically replaced the chakra cannons with solid tungsten cannons with even greater armor-piercing capabilities, with penetration comparable to that of S-rank ninjutsu. Even with a mastery of the old man, the strongest Leikai, this cannon would only cause minor injuries. Uchiha Kirabi's face darkened as he looked toward the north gate with a cold smile. There's no way he can withstand this kind of attack. That means he'll be defeated here because of this tiny detail. Crunch, crack, boom, violent explosions echoed, accompanied by billowing smoke. The artillery shells, like meteorites, instantly pounded a hole in the ground in front of the city gate, nearly 100 meters in diameter. The ground shook. Spiderweb-like cracks spread across the earth. Is that kid dead? Did our cannon work? Even those standing atop the city wall could feel the violent tremors, like an earthquake. The ninjas and samurai looked in horror at the direct impact, their eyes suddenly filled with a hint of fear. It was like thunder striking their ears. Even though they were ninjas, facing this terrifying scene, they felt a chill in their hearts. Be quiet, Rami turned his head and shouted coldly, go back to your positions and prepare for the next move, quick. After tightening his face and temporarily stabilizing the morale of the troops, Rami quickly looked at Matoi beside him and asked in a low voice, what happened? Matoi, was that guy killed in the explosion? However, Matoi was trembling all over, with his hands stiff, looking at the smoke-shrouded place below the city in horror. Such horror, such coldness, such evil chakra, what the hell is that? Seeing this, Rami's expression suddenly changed. As if realizing something, he shouted to his men without hesitation, quick, send the message that the war is over, activate Plan B, and immediately unleash ninjutsu. At a command, the ninjas who had previously performed the lightning release, thunder illusion lightning pillar retreated immediately. From the kilometer-long city wall, a group of ninjas dressed in distinctive attire emerged. They wore red Iwagakure uniforms and Iwagakure forward protectors with red bands. As soon as they arrived, they began to form hand seals. At this moment, in front of the city gate, the smoke emitting a pungent smell of sulfur suddenly trembled. A giant palm flashing with blazing flames suddenly tore through the smoke and appeared in everyone's sight. Then, it waved in all directions. A strong wind suddenly arose, blowing away the thick smoke, revealing the terrifying thing behind it. The skeletal giants surrounding Uchiha had their raised hands and bony arms gone. Their shoulder blades and that hideous skull face half shattered. Flames blazed from the broken ends, and cracks covered the entire Susanoo. Most striking was the young man, protected only by half his Susanoo. The left side of his body, along with half his head, was reduced to a skeleton. Strands of flesh crept frantically along the pale new bones, forming various organs. Cough cough cough, fuck. You're such a loser. You even invented armor-piercing rounds. Instantly, all his injuries healed. He pulled a piece of clothing from the sealed scroll he'd urgently saved and put it on. Uchiha coughed hard, spitting out a mouthful of black phlegm. No wonder Orochimaru was driven away. There's something wrong with the technology tree these barbarians have chosen. On the city wall, hearing the young man's powerful curse and seeing Uchiha intact in the huge pit, the surroundings suddenly fell into deathly silence. Uchiha was stunned for a moment, raised his head in confusion, and looked back. Little Uchiha shouldn't have leaked it. Why are they so shocked? The next moment, relying on his powerful hearing, he heard the whispers of the people on the city wall. Sure enough, that kid is the leader of that terrorist organization. This clothes, that's right, Akatsuki. This evil organization is indeed inseparable from Uchiha. Following the sound to find the focus of everyone's attention, Uchiha realized that what he pulled out from the scroll was actually the Akatsuki robe given to him by Yahiko. At this moment, as soon as the Akatsuki robe with a black background and red clouds was put on, the temperament of the villain emerged spontaneously. Uchiha seemed to be in a state of realization. He surveyed the vast crater, And suddenly, a feeling of being pain, attacking Konoha, suddenly arose. I'm pain, attacking Konoha right now. If you just send me money, I'll miss your side when I unleash Super Shinra Tensei, and your house's value will skyrocket. Shaking his head to dispel the jokes he'd read on some obscure forum in a past life, Uchiha Chi coughed again. Just as he was about to throw in a line like how many floors does it take to carry a bag of rice, to liven up the atmosphere, a sudden boom erupted east of the city gate. Immediately, accompanied by an earth-shaking tremor, smoke rose from the east, similar to the smoke from the city gate. The next moment, quick, we can't let him break through now. Atop the city wall, Rei Miyai slammed the battlements and screamed, use your ninjutsu for me. Uchiha Chi's gaze shifted to the city wall. At that moment, a row of Iwagakure ninjas in red garb raised their hands and cast a spell, pressing against the wall. The next moment, joint ninjutsu, earth release, 10,000 miles earth-flowing wall, accompanied by the roars of the Iwagakure ninjas, the ground shook with a rumbling sound. Then, Uchiha Chi noticed that the 20-meter-high wall before him began to rise continuously. 30 meters, 50 meters, 100 meters. The surroundings were suddenly plunged into a gloomy shadow. As the earth trembled, earth and rocks flew high. The wall, originally made of black stone, suddenly transformed into earth. From the bottom, the 100-meter-high wall seemed like a chasm separating them. Uchiha Chi was startled. Only then did he realize from the changes in his surroundings that it wasn't the wall itself that was rising. In fact, the height of the Kumagakure where Lamia and his group were stationed remained unchanged. Rather, the ground beneath his feet was sinking and collapsing. This jutsu might seem like Earth-style, 10,000 miles earth-flowing wall. But raising the wall to nearly 100 meters in a short period of time would not only waste manpower and resources, but would also make it difficult to maintain defense. Furthermore, it wouldn't be a project that would yield results in a short period of time. However, if the idea were reversed, using Earth-style, earthquake core to preemptively hollow out the ground within 1,000 meters around the inner city, forcing attackers into a 100-meter deep ditch, things would become much simpler. Therefore, this jutsu was a joint effort of numerous Iwagakure ninjas, combined ninjutsu, earth-style, super-large earthquake core. Meanwhile, within the inner city, the second ring of defenses employed a completely opposite technique from the entire Kumagakure plan. Countless Kumagakure elites combined to unleash another jutsu, earth-style, earth-flowing wall. The second ring of defenses served as the boundary, raising the entire center of the inner city by nearly 50 meters, creating a 50-meter-high earthen rampart that was impenetrable by conventional means. Combined with the already elevated castle tower, built atop a cylindrical cliff, the inner city now resembled a pyramidal structure with 3 gates. This shift in elevation and lowering of the terrain, both for the enemy and for allies, instantly gave the defending Kumagakure an extremely advantageous terrain advantage. Occupying the high ground offered a wide view, allowing them to gaze down upon the surrounding terrain with unobstructed views. This instantly gave them a 100-fold advantage in intelligence, negating the disadvantage of the barrier's destruction and further diversifying their offensive methods. At this moment, Uchiha Chi raised his head, frowning slightly as he saw a torrential downpour of kunai laced with explosive tags rain down from the 120-meter-high wall. And beneath their feet, the explosive flame formation, the same one in the original novel that could cripple Nagato, was connected. The Cloud Village wanted to use this method to wear him down, similar to how Conan bombarded Uchiha Obito with explosive seas of talismans, trying to force him to exhaust his chakra here. However, all of this was ignored by Uchiha Chi after he casually replenished half of his Susanoo. After all, now that he had obtained nearly half of the Eight Tails chakra, Uchiha Chi didn't need this little bonus to activate the Gundam. What concerned him more was another matter. Where did all these Iwagakure come from? Uchiha Chi frowned, looking at the group of red-clothed Iwagakure on the city wall, vaguely feeling something strange. Even if the daimyo of the Land of Earth supports them and the Iwagakure is willing to unite, isn't this a bit too many people? Chapter 347 Intelligence Killing Bureau. Fight back. Yasuko Magatama. They hollowed out 1,000 meters around the inner city, practically abandoning the capital of the Land of Lightning, all for the sole purpose of killing one man. The massive, 3-tiered pyramidal structure, encompassing 10 hectares, towered between heaven and earth, a majestic and unparalleled presence. At that moment, standing before the highest and most central castle tower, Jiraiya gazed down at the undulating terrain below, his expression heavy with solemnity. Undoubtedly, this manipulation of the terrain, orchestrated by Kumagakure and Iwagakure, was a deadly move aimed at Uchiha Chi. This killing spree was orchestrated entirely based on the intelligence revealed by Uchiha Chi, the skeletal giant known as Setsuna, who appeared 3 times in the last battle. After those 3 times, the Kumagakure side noticed that Uchiha Chi's chakra was exhausted. The loss of the Zero Tail in the Battle of Hell Valley didn't have an impact on Uchiha Chi either. Finally, if it weren't for the Senjutsu that doesn't require the fusion of Senjutsu chakra but can be activated solely by natural energy, Uchiha Chi would never have survived a head-on confrontation with two-tailed beast Jinchuriki. So, Jiraiya glanced to his side, where he saw the young man Ai, who was solemnly gazing at the city wall through a telescope and giving instructions to his men. He took a deep breath. Facing Uchiha Chi, who possesses immortality, super speed regeneration, monster strength, strong skeleton defense, unique Senjutsu, super strong perception, illusionary eye techniques and ninjutsu, a nearly perfect Uchiha Chi, the Kumagakure side can only attack from the single flaw that Uchiha Chi revealed, that's his chakra reserves, but this kind of attack isn't enough. Just trapping him isn't enough to kill Uchiha Chi. With that thought in mind, Jiraiya narrowed his eyes and silently formed seals with his toes. To an outsider, it looked like he was lifting his clogs and scratching his legs. Bang! A puff of dust, as if kicked up by a foot, rose up. The slight movement was masked by a stone. From behind it, a frog the size of a fingernail leaped out and quietly hopped over to the side of the young man, trying to eavesdrop on his plans. Lord Ai, we have made Uchiha Chi fall into the trenches planned. Right now, the first line of defense is executing the operation to consume his chakra according to the established plan. After hearing the report from the intelligence member beside him, young Ai continued to observe the city gate in the distance. Seeing that the situation was very good, he couldn't help but curl his lips slightly and revealed a sneer. Very good, 100-meter deep trenches, explosive flame formations, and ninja tool rain with detonating talismans. These techniques can't kill Uchiha Chi, but they can force him to consume chakra. But this certainly can't stop that brat. So, the first line of defense will consume his chakra as much as possible, and our deployment in the second line of defense is to force out his tricky fairy technique. The battle will proceed quickly. I can't stay here. Young Ai's face was stern. He took a deep breath, and glared at him with his tiger eyes. You supervise be here to continue firing the chakra cannons, continuously bombarding the invaders on both sides, and blocking their advance. I want to be there to command. Yes, the intelligence squad leader immediately stood at attention and accepted the order. However, at this moment, from his perspective, he suddenly saw the first line of defense in the distance suddenly move. Huh? The intelligence squad leader's eyes widened and he exclaimed, Master Ai, wait. You, look over there. Young Ai was startled and glanced sideways. At that moment, from the direction of the North City Gate, a young man's ferocious roar exploded. Compound ninja technique, high sky cannon. Ha! Accompanied by a massive airflow and flames that threatened to burst the clouds above, the cannon shot skyward. It swept back countless ninja tools that had fallen to the valley floor and launched them back into the air. Boom. The earth-shaking movement shook the entire city. Boom. 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 As if someone were repeatedly driving detonators into the foundations of the inner city, the roar continued to rise from beneath the city walls. Blasting away all obstacles with a wind style, a giant Setsuna-like form ascended from the 100-meter deep valley. Every thrust of its bony palm into the mountain wall shook the city. Silence followed with a final roar. A massive bony palm, looming overhead, like a blanket covering the sun, struck the city wall. With a single wave of its hand, it sent countless ninja and samurai atop it careening towards the city. A hideous, gigantic skull rose from the edge, casting a massive shadow over the city. 2 blazing rays of light suddenly lit from its hollow eye sockets, and with a cold, emotionless gaze, it gazed upon the people behind the walls. The brilliant morning sun slowly rose, its blazing light soon covering the entire city. Clouds rolled, birds flitted in fright, and the people were silent. That day, the people of Kumagakure finally remembered the terror they'd felt at the hands of those eyes, the humiliation of being imprisoned in a birdcage. Quick, young Ai, after a brief moment of shock, snapped back to his senses, roaring furiously, where are those Iwagakure people? Hurry, push them down, bury them in that sewer built for them. The intelligence officers following young AI immediately obeyed, running to the castle tower to relay the order. Then, wait, Master AI, what's that guy doing again? The intelligence squad leader was startled again, staring in horror toward the city gate. At that moment, the massive skeletal giant, its hands clasped on the city wall, finally scaled the wall. A 30-meter tall, half-skeletal figure stood atop the 20-meter-high wall, gazing directly at the castle tower in the center of the city. Then, it suddenly raised one hand and raised it to the sky. Is it coming? Seeing this, young AI's pupils suddenly shrank. He stared intently at the Susanoo on the city wall, muttering to himself, is that kid going to summon the thunder of heaven and earth like last time, condensing it into that magnificent thunder sword? However, contrary to AI's expectations, at this moment, it was as if the sun's brilliance had been snatched away by that bony hand. Endless, brilliant flames blazed brightly from the skeleton giant's palm, as if a tiny sun appeared before the eyes of everyone in Yunming City. Within the dazzling ball of light, enormous, terrifying, deep, concentrated, strange, and cold chakra converged frantically, ultimately, condensing into a fiery red magatama. Not a thunder sword, what then? Young AI's pupils shrank to the size of pinpoints, his face filled with horror. Then, he seemed to have a hallucination, as if he saw from an extremely far distance. The young man in Susanoo coldly uttered to him, look carefully, this is Yasuka Magatama. Chapter 348, can you take the first one? Then, what will you do with the remaining 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9? Atop the mountain to the left of the castle tower. Bang! The cannon exploded. A bright yellow chakra beam, blasted from the ferocious steel giant, shot straight toward the east of the city. The moment the beam landed, a small mushroom cloud instantly erupted. Debris, white mist, dust, and a fragment of a broken limb were hurled wildly by the intense heat and powerful shockwave. However, this surefire shot fell flat on its face. Damn it, we should just 3 more units to the right. This fog can actually affect a flawless Byakugan like me. Hinata glared, trying to observe the east side, and couldn't help biting his teeth. Also, what is that water monster that can barely block the artillery fire? After the first cannon was fired, using a special armor-piercing shell to blow off half of Uchiha Chi's body, it laid the foundation for the success of U9's combat plan in the direction of the North City Gate. Then, under the arrangement of the intelligence team, Killer Bee and Hinata controlled the chakra cannon and continued to attack the Akatsuki organization that broke into the city wall from the east and trapped under the first and second lines of defense. The shattering of the perception barrier didn't significantly impact the Kumagakure's intelligence transmission. With the assistance of the Konoha Hyuga clan and the Iwagakure Kamasuryan clan, invited by the daimyo, and the advantageous terrain, the encirclement force against the Akatsuki quickly gathered. However, just when the chakra cannon should have been unleashed, Meidarumi's water-style, Mist Hidenjutsu and Mainjutsu Kazuki's water-style, Tate Debosi disrupted the situation. Hiding in the thick fog, 2 Akatsuki groups, leveraging the Mangekyo level Blood Dragon Eye and the superior vision of the Rinnegan, repeatedly broke through the defenders' lines. The Kumagakure seemed to have greatly underestimated their strength. Even with their largest force, they were unable to halt the advance. They were about to approach the 50-meter-high wall guarding the second ring of Kumagakure's true elite. Master B, please hurry. The defenders are almost collapsing. From the mountainside, the intelligence team members urged urgently. I understand. Killer B took a deep breath, borrowed another chakra from the eight-tailed Jayuki, turned to look at Hyuga Shota, frowned and asked, Hyuga boy, can you be more precise this time? You don't have to tell me. Hyuga Shota snorted coldly and said directly, follow my command this time, you will definitely hit the target. How could a group of rebel ninjas escape the pursuit of my eyes? However, at this moment, a sudden change occurred. A flash of lightning suddenly blazed from the direction of the castle tower, followed by a startled cry. Killer B turned his head and saw his eldest brother, young AI, rushing towards him with an anxious look on his face, shouting, watch out to the north. Startled, he quickly turned his head to the north gate. At that moment, as the 30-meter-tall skeletal giant atop the 20-meter-high north wall swung its arms, a meteor-like object was hurled towards Killer B's position. The intense light instantly filled Killer B's field of vision, like a sun rising from the ground, a ball of light radiating a brilliant light. Only when it got closer could he clearly discern it, a crimson magatama, a full 10 meters in size, spinning madly. It whipped up a whirlwind, ripped through the air, and hurtled toward him with a rustling sound. A strike like that would surely destroy the chakra cannon, given its limited ability to move quickly. Killer Bee immediately wanted to adjust the muzzle and use the chakra cannon to counter the Uchiha Magatama. However, as they say, misfortunes never come singly. Hyuga Shota, who was standing beside Killer Bee, suddenly changed expression, his eyes widened, and he tugged at Killer Bee's sleeve in horror. Hey, is that true? Hey, Kumagakure, look to the east. Something's flying over here too. Upon hearing this reminder, Killer Bee's face tensed, and he quickly turned his head to look east. At this moment, standing to the east, behind the Akatsuki organization that had already broken through the 50-meter city wall, the red-haired young man watched all this unfold indifferently, keenly seizing the opportunity when Uchiha Chi counterattacked and threw the Uchiha Magatama at the chakra cannon in the center of the city. Then, he decisively unfolded his summoning scroll, lifting a massive 2-meter-long cannon barrel from the smoke and aiming it at the two men behind the chakra cannon. Immediately afterwards, Scorpion revealed a faint smile, raised his hand, and punched the chakra core at the end of the barrel, blasting it. Boom, a bright yellow beam, no less powerful than the chakra cannon, instantly blasted out, flying towards the two men. Like a clarion call for a counterattack, two simultaneous attacks, one from the east and one from the north, formed a pincer attack. The chakra cannon could only defend against one direction. Even though AI, a speedster, had rushed over from the other side of the castle tower and had reacted quickly, the mountain peaks separating the two sides were nearly 100 meters apart. AI wasn't Uchiha in his sage form, he couldn't reach that distance in a single leap. Damn it, Killer Bee gritted his teeth, sweat dripping down his forehead, his heart pounding with the pressure. We can't let them destroy the chakra cannon. Without the chakra cannon, our plan to force Uchiha to unleash his sage technique at the second line of defense will be thwarted. With this thought, Killer Bee's face darkened, and he raised his hand. Hachi, with Killer Bee's furious roar, 8 massive octopus tails erupted from behind him. The 70-meter-tall 8-tailed Gyuki suddenly rose from the peak. It raised its head and rapidly spat out an ink pellet, blasting the scorpion's laser cannon. Then, its 8 tails and head buried deep, enveloping the entire mountain. The Uchiha Magatama arrived in an instant, spinning wildly and crashing down onto the 8-tailed Gyuki's body. Boom, a fierce wind, accompanied by violent sparks, exploded with a roar. The Uchiha Magatama's explosion blasted the peak into a small mushroom cloud. And at this moment, the northern city gate. Standing atop a 20-meter-high wall in a 30-meter-tall skeleton Susanoo, Uchiha narrowed his eyes, gazing at the spot where the Uchiha Magatama had crashed down, a faint look of surprise on his face. That's Scorpion's chakra cannon. He actually blocked 2 blasts at once. You have to understand, what he threw wasn't just any ordinary Uchiha Magatama, but a true Uchiha Magatama summoned through the sacred artifact Ursakani no Magatama and the Uchiha bloodline, a weapon powerful enough to rival Uchiha Madara's complete Susanoo. A single strike from this terrifying thing could shake the earth. Whatever, Uchiha scoffed, coldly gazing at the direction where the Kumagakure side had set up their massive chakra cannon. He had to admit, the armor-piercing rounds that Kumagakure had chosen, seemingly out of place in their tech tree, were a problem. A skeleton-level Susanoo alone couldn't defend against such an attack, and if it were allowed to continue firing, it would cause minor complications for the rest of the operation. With this thought, Uchiha raised his hand slightly, and the sacred Ursakani no Magatama hanging around his neck seemed to respond to this movement, luminescent. With this movement, the massive Susanoo Titan immediately swung his hand and summoned 8 sun-like objects in midair. 8 identical, dazzling Ursakani no Magatama. Go, AI, can you take the first one? Then, what are you going to do with the remaining 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9? Chapter 349, The Sad Disciple Who Chases the Sun, the magic and illusion of the sun shining in the sky mirror. The moment the fiery crimson Magatama, composed of concentrated chakra, touched the ground, intense light instantly burst forth from the cracks in its surface. The chakra, compressed to its limit, rapidly released its contained energy, transforming it into mechanical work, light, and heat. The explosion of light instantly expanded uncontrollably. Visible waves instantly radiated from the mountain peaks surrounding the castle tower, dispersing in all directions. Earth, rock, sand, and chunks of the tailed beast's tissue were instantly blasted away. Amidst the roaring wind, Hinata stared blankly at the ruins before him, feeling a chill run down his spine. Is this the power of the Uchiha? Honestly, as a member of the Hyuga clan, living a life of luxury in Konoha, Hyuga had heard countless tales of the Uchiha's farewell in just 3 short months. Yet, he had never truly acknowledged the truth. Even when accepting the daimyo's invitation to aid and protect the daimyo of the Land of Lightning, he simply dismissed the 3 Magatama Uchiha as nothing more than that. But only now, when he was truly there, feeling the nearly despairing disparity in power, did Hyuga suddenly realize, that fellow, the toiling figure he'd seen countless times passing by the Minamiga River, the one whose painstakingly collected sack of kanso he'd kicked back into the river 3 months earlier, the one he'd despised for repeating simple, boring D-rank missions day in and day out, what kind of freak was he? No, Hinata face turned pale as paper in an instant, his heart pounding inexplicably. The heat wave from the explosion passed through the protection of the A-tail's huge body and hit his face, but he not only did not feel hot, but his whole body was cold, and his palms were sweating. It's too dangerous. I can't stay here. I have to leave. I am the hope of the Hyuga clan. Just as Hyuga, who was acting as an artilleryman, became timid and looked around, wanting to escape, the young man AI jumped from the rock peak of the castle tower with a nervous look on his face and landed in front of the severely injured 8-tailed Gyuki. B, are you okay? The huge octopus tentacle slowly retracted, revealing the dusty killer bee behind him. Facing his elder brother's concerned eyes, he suppressed the horror in his heart and forced a smile. I'm fine, big brother, and the chakra cannon is fine too. As if a heavy stone had fallen from his heart, the young man AI suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. That's good, for the hidden cloud village at this moment, it would be difficult for any attack method, including the tailed beast ball, to cause much hindrance to Uchiha Chi. After all, when the other party was in Hell Valley, he was able to forcibly defeat 2 tailed beast balls with a single celestial technique, the super tailed beast ball dark expansion Rasengan. The special armor-piercing rounds and the chakra cannon brought from the village were their only real weapons capable of effectively inflicting damage on Uchiha Chi. Furthermore, if coordinated properly, the combined ninjutsu of the Kumagakure army, coupled with the unexpected helper, could severely damage Uchiha Chi here, forcing him to unleash his final Senjutsu trump card. Even more so, they could kill him directly in the open space between the Tuleu city wall and the castle tower. However, if the final weapon was destroyed by the Uchiha before the plan could begin, then the first 2 lines of defense would be essentially useless to Uchiha Chi. B, it's uncertain how many times Uchiha Chi can unleash that kind of attack. To be on the safe side, you'll transform into a tailed beast first and carry the chakra cannon to the top of the second line of defense, the earth-flowing wall. Young AI made a decisive decision and laid out his plan. With a combined ninja forces protection, you can go all out. However, before he could finish his words, Killer Bee suddenly looked up, his eyes widening. Wait, big brother, he raised his head blankly, as if stunned by fear, staring blankly at the sky. What are those things, huh? Young AI was startled at the words and turned his head immediately. The next moment, he saw, leaving them no time to breathe, the hideous and terrifying skeleton giant, thousands of meters away, waved its wings again. At that moment, 8 objects, as bright as the sun, lit up in the sky again. With trailing flames like falling meteors, they shot straight towards the chakra cannon under the horrified gaze of tens of thousands of people. The scene briefly resembled the set of the film Attack on Titan, where the Survey Corps, encircling the Beast Titan, stared at the massive rebel hurled at them, helplessly awaiting death. It also resembled the mythical scene where the unyielding Amaterasu, finally forced into the Amano Iwado, and the humans, relieved as if the clouds had been cleared, suddenly discovered they had walked into fucking Chinese myth. The one who had survived was a golden crow, and there were 8 more of the same golden crow in the sky. And yet, their camp lacked a single hunk named Hao Yi. An atmosphere of despair spread rapidly across the field. Even young AI, momentarily dazed by the onslaught, was momentarily stunned. But soon, his expression changed. He raised his head heavily, staring at the 8 suns descending from the sky with bloodshot eyes, clenched his fists and said in a deep voice, "B, brother, I'm here." Killer Bee responded immediately after hearing the voice, then turned and analyzed with a grim expression, "Now, we can only give up the chakra cannon. We still have time to evacuate here. A complete form of the Yasuka Magatama, one that falls down is almost like the explosion of a tailed beast fall with maximum power. No matter how durable the 8-tailed Gyuki is, no matter how powerful the so-called perfect Jinchuriki is, resisting 5 is the limit of the limit. If he really wants to resist 9 in a row alone, Killer B will have to go to see the Sage of 6 Paths on the spot. However, no, the young man's face condensed, and he said in a deep voice, "We can't give up, our plan is successful overall, and now Uchiha Chi has fallen into our trap, the next round of offensive against him has begun. Now, as long as we can survive this round of counterattack, victory will belong to us, Kumagakure. B, just do it for Kumagakure, we must stop this round of attack here, even if it means sacrificing our lives." Hearing this, Killer B took a deep breath, and when he opened his eyes again, he was full of fighting spirit. "Okay. Big brother, let's fight side by side, we are the strongest Abi combination." The two brothers looked at each other, and saw the determination of both sides in each other's eyes. Then, they took a step forward together, tightened their faces, and faced the 8 flaming Magatama that were about to land here. However, on the other side, standing on top of Susanoo, looking down at the panic on the faces of everyone present, Uchiha Chi set his sights on the 2 people who stepped forward. Instantly, he revealed a playful smile. "Goodwill, you still want to resist?" But, Uchiha Chi's face turned cold, and he shook his head, saying calmly, "This is just a fearless struggle, it's almost time." The moment the voice fell, Uchiha Chi raised his palm, snap. With a crisp snap of his fingers towards the sky. The seeds that had been planted the moment he set foot in the city took root and sprouted at this moment. Senjutsu, Illusion, Sunlight Mirror. Chapter 350, The Disappearing Magatama. The Sea of Flowers blooms. Snap. A crisp snap of fingers followed, and with a seemingly ordinary movement, a transparent ripple quietly spread from the air. "What's that?" "It seems to be the vibration of the barrier. What's going on?" Did the barrier just shatter? In the distance, a murmur rose among the Kumagakure sensory unit, cautiously observing Uchiha Chi's movements from atop the city walls, continuously analyzing his abilities and reporting intelligence to the castle tower. The Kumagakure ninjas stared blankly at the sudden ripples in the sky surrounding the regeneration barrier. They had only just reported the information about Uchiha Chi's dismantling of the barrier at the city gate, and they were certain they had seen it right. The barrier had indeed, at that moment, been strangely transformed red by Uchiha Chi and then shattered. It should have vanished, but now, strangely, the barrier in the sky had reappeared, rippling with waves that were difficult to detect without careful observation. Could it be that the barrier's shattering just now was an illusion? An illusion? Captain Nirui, the perception team leader, frowned slightly, speculating on this possibility. His expression immediately darkened, and he turned to look at his subordinates on his left. "No matter what, report this information first. Yuru, you go contact the castle tower." "Wait, Captain, where are you looking at?" "I'm here." Nirui was stunned when he heard Yuru's voice suddenly coming from his right. "You're on my right?" "What?" "Captain, I've always been behind you." Yuru stared at the captain in front of him and asked in confusion. "What did you say?" "Yuru, you're clearly in front of the squad leader." Another team member on the side frowned and interrupted. "You're kidding. I haven't left my position since the beginning." "What the hell are you talking about?" Yuru retorted in frustration. Hearing the team members quarrel, Nirui seemed to realize something. "From my perspective, Yuru is to my left, but his voice comes from my right. He claims to be behind me, but another team member noticed he's in front of me." Nirui's scalp tingled. He instinctively raised his head and glanced toward the sky, toward the direction of the 8 Yasuka Magatama that Uchiha Chi had earlier thrown. However, the 8 flaming Magatama that should have been gliding through the air, crashing down into the mountain, vanished from sight. How could this happen? What happened? What on earth happened? Was it because of Uchiha Chi's action just now? The barrier, which had already been broken, reappeared, disrupting the vision and hearing of the team members, including me. The attack from the sky also disappeared at this moment. He couldn't help but think of the ripple that had spread from the sky across the city. The next moment, Nirui began to tremble with fear. Every muscle in his body seemed to twitch, his teeth began to clash involuntarily, the skin around his eyes stretched as if it would burst, and his round eyeballs seemed to be about to burst. Illusion? No. This is an illusion. It's definitely an illusion, an ultimate illusion beyond all imagination. capable of distorting vision and hearing, massive enough to cover 10 hectares and hypnotize the entire city. This information must be conveyed to the castle tower quickly. Suddenly, Niruai's frantic screams and his heart stopped abruptly, because he saw, at that moment, not far away, above the hideous and cold skull giant, Uchiha Chi lowered his head slightly, his cold eyes glancing at him. In an instant, Niruai felt as if he had fallen into an icy cave. Yes, immortal technique, illusion, sunlight mirror. This jutsu, based on the principles of the immortal technique, Yin Tanjensing combined with the city-wide regeneration barrier, the Sharingan, mirror heaven and earth rotation, Nirvana shrine no jutsu, and bubble, is an unrated illusion with a range of 10 hectares. Its essence is similar to the genjutsu used by Uchiha Shinichi to transfer the Sharingan to the pond beneath his feet. Through the bubble, transfer Sharingan. Any enemy within the barrier, when their gaze falls upon it, is treated as if they were meeting the 3 Magatama Sharingan, and the illusion is continuously applied to them, in increments of seconds. The solution was simple, the same method used to counter the Sharingan. The two of them would disrupt each other's chakra flow to dispel the illusion. But the key point was, even if the illusion was dispelled, within this barrier, unless one stared at the floor or closed their eyes, no matter where they looked, they would see the barrier covering the entire sky, triggering the vast natural energy of Yin done within it, causing them to be trapped in the illusion again. This was a technique that bridged the strengths and weaknesses of various illusions, forged through the Uchiha clan's profound mastery of illusion, a near mirror. Like a mirror from the sky, it cast its gaze downward, illuminating the land wherever it touched. The Magatama disappeared. At this moment, standing side by side on the mountain top, facing the 8 Yasuka Magatama with a determined look, Abby and Abby stared at each other, a look of bewilderment in their eyes. Thousands of meters apart, relying on ninja common sense and routine, they wouldn't immediately consider themselves under a genjutsu. Coupled with this slow transmission of information, this determined, is this the nature of the jutsu itself, the Magatama? Can it create invisibility? Even if it can, I can still hear the wind from the falling Magatama, but it's not blowing in that direction. So, Uchiha Chi wants to strike targets in other directions, but he has no reason to. No, it's getting hotter. Could this be a genjutsu? Even with AI's swift reflexes, by the time he could only use the simplest process of elimination, eliminating impossible options one by one and finally converging on the correct answer, it was too late. B. Break each other's genjutsu with the 8 tails, then break mine. Young AI's face drastically changed. Recalling the position where Killer B stood, he waved his hand to press on his shoulder, but his pressure missed. He immediately realized something was wrong and roared in anger. This genjutsu had distorted at least 3 of his senses, sight, hearing, and touch. Upon hearing the voice, Kirabi, with unconditional trust in his elder brother, immediately obeyed. However, after he first dispelled his own genjutsu, regaining his vision and seeing the 8 falling Magatama, he was once again genjutsu-ed, causing him to be even slower in removing the illusion cast on young AI. As he dispelled his own genjutsu, quickly learning the principles behind them through experience, he closed his eyes, dispelled young AI's, and relayed the information to him. Like a meteorite, the flaming Magatama plummeted, spinning and twirling wildly. It landed. Instantly, countless exploding flames coalesced into a chaotic, folded pattern of petals, blossoming at the summit like a mandala flower sea. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.